Section 1. The Beginning of Everything. Helgen to Dragonreach. Lower your sword, cozy knight. Pull that blanket up a little tighter, close your eyes if you want to, and let your body go heavy. Tonight, we are going somewhere cold and ancient and impossibly beautiful. We are going back to Skyrim, not just to the surface of it, the snowy roads and the lantern-lit inns and the distant sound of a lute drifting through tavern walls, but all the way down into its bones, into its questlines, into the hundreds of quiet, strange, heartbreaking, and occasionally absurd stories that are woven into every corner of that province. Tonight, we are going to walk through 155 of them. That number might sound like a lot, but Skyrim earned every single one. So, let's start where every version of you has always started. On a wooden cart, hands bound with rough rope, rumbling down a dirt road as the gray sky opens up ahead of you. The wind has that particular bite that only Skyrim has, the kind that doesn't just chill your skin, but gets into the space behind your eyes. There are other prisoners on the cart with you. A horse thief who hasn't stopped complaining, a proud Nord rebel who is holding himself still and straight even now, and Ulfric Stormcloak himself, the man who killed a king with his voice, sitting silent with a gag in his mouth like the whole world is trying to make sure he never speaks again. The cart wheels creak over frozen ground as the Imperial soldiers ride alongside. Nobody is talking. The sky ahead is thick with clouds the color of old iron. And then you see Helgen. It's a proper little town, the kind that has been there long enough to feel permanent. Stone walls, timber buildings, smoke rising from chimneys, a blacksmith's ring of metal on metal drifting across the cold air. Children are watching from the roadside as the carts roll in. A little boy points. His mother pulls him away. The road narrows into a courtyard, and the soldiers begin calling out names from a list. And one by one, the condemned step forward, and you realize with a kind of slow, cold certainty that today is the day you were meant to die. This is the quest called Unbound, and it is the first breath of everything. General Tullius stands in the courtyard with the measured calm of a man who has ordered executions before and will order them again. Beside him, Thalmor agents watch with those particular flat expressions that powerful people wear when they feel completely certain of their place in the order of things. The list gets read. Lokir of Rorikstead, the horse thief, breaks for the gate. An arrow catches him before he makes it 20 feet. The executioner's block is waiting. A priestess begins to offer last rites. Ralof of Riverwood, a Stormcloak, stands beside you in quiet solidarity. You are about to kneel. The headsman raises the axe, and then the sky tears open. That sound, that first earth-shaking, chest-vibrating roar that rolls over the mountains like a wave of sound that reality can't quite contain, is one of the most genuinely stirring moments in all of gaming. The dragon is enormous, black-scaled, ancient-looking, and absolutely real. Alduin's wings spread against the gray sky, and the world becomes noise and fire, and screaming horses and soldiers running in every direction. The execution dissolves into chaos. Ralof grabs you by the arm and pulls you toward a tower. Alduin lands on the battlements above and opens his mouth, and from somewhere deep in the world's oldest machinery, the Thu'um comes out like thunder given physical form. The opening sequence of Skyrim, the whole sweep of it from the cart ride to the escape through the keep, is technically a single quest, but it contains the seeds of every single story in the game. The Civil War, which will run in the background of everything you do. The dragons, who are returning to the world after an age of absence. The ancient language that reshapes reality when it is spoken. The question of whether you are just a prisoner who got lucky, or whether there is something in you that the world has been waiting for. You escape Helgen with either Ralof or Hadvar, depending on which door you run through in the smoke and confusion. The choice is small, and the game doesn't make a big deal of it, but it's worth noticing that this is Skyrim's first choice, and it's made while the world is literally burning around you. The road to Riverwood is quiet after all of that. Pine trees stand in rows along the slope. The path curves gently downward. Your companion talks, explaining things, filling in the gaps of a world you were born into knowing nothing about. Hadvar or Ralof, soldier or rebel, they're both telling you the same essential thing. Skyrim is at war with itself. A dragon just woke up after centuries of being dead, and you are now somehow mixed up in all of it. Riverwood is a small town of maybe 20 people, which is to say it is exactly the right size for a place that sits at the beginning of something. There's a sawmill, there's the Sleeping Giant Inn, there's a blacksmith named Alvor, who is Hadvar's uncle, or Hod, whose wife Gerdur is Raylof's sister, depending on which path you took. The town feels lived in. Dogs wander, chickens complain, Fandal and Sven are quietly locked in what will become a recurring and frankly exhausting competition for the affections of a woman named Camilla Valerius. The Riverwood trader has been robbed of its golden claw, and the merchant's sister is already itching to do something about it. Before the storm is the quest that sends you north to Whiterun to warn Jarl Balgruf that a dragon attacked Helgen. It is, on the surface, a delivery quest, but walking that road for the first time, with the mountains rising on either side and the sky doing something extraordinary above, feels like something more than an errand. It feels like the world opening. The road to Whiterun passes through wide plains that the game calls the Whiterun Hold, though that bureaucratic name doesn't do justice to what it actually looks like at dusk. The grass is pale gold. The mountains to the east and west frame the sky like hands cupped around something precious. You might encounter a giant on the way, herding a mammoth with that slow, unhurried patience that seems to belong to beings who have been doing the same thing for a very long time. You might find a collapsed tower with a couple of bandits who are about to learn that attacking someone who survived a dragon attack is a mistake in calibration. And then Whiterun rises ahead, built into the side of a hill, its walls and towers and the long stone stairs that lead up to Dragon's Reach, all lit by the last of the day's light. Dragon's Reach is, architecturally speaking, a statement. Enormous carved wooden pillars, a ceiling high enough to make you feel small, even if you have come from somewhere with actual grand architecture in it. Balgruf the Greater sits on his throne with the particular weight of a man who has been making hard decisions for years and has not yet found a way to make it easier. His housecarl Irileth stands at his side, steady and razor-edged, a Dunmer whose loyalty to Balgruf is the kind that doesn't need to be declared because it is simply present in every moment she occupies the same room as him. The quest Dragon Rising is technically a separate mission from Before the Storm, though it follows immediately from it. Balgruf sends you, along with Irileth and a small detachment of guards, to the Western Watchtower, which is currently on fire because a dragon is there. The approach to the Watchtower is a masterclass in escalating dread. You hear it before you see it. The sound that Skyrim's dragons make, that particular combination of wing beats and something that feels almost like weather, is designed to activate something primal in the human auditory system. Your heartbeat does a thing. The guards around you are scared and doing a reasonable job of not showing it. And then the dragon lands, and the fight begins. And when it's over and the dragon is dead, it happens. The soul absorption. That whirlwind of golden light pouring up from the body, arcing through the air and flooding into you. The guards step back. Someone says, very quietly, that they have never seen anything like that before. Irileth looks at you with an expression that has moved from tactical assessment into something more careful, more considered. You shout. The first unrelenting force, a burst of compressed air that rolls across the hillside like a physical thing. And Irileth's expression shifts one more time into something that might be the beginnings of awe. A messenger arrives at a run. The Greybeards have spoken. They have called for you. Their voices rang out from High Hrothgar, and the sound of it rolled across all of Skyrim, and every guard in every hold heard it. And now, everyone knows that something has happened that hasn't happened in a very, very long time. You are Dragonborn. The quest, the way of the voice, sends you up the 7,000 steps to High Hrothgar, which is exactly as beautiful and as brutal a walk as it sounds. The steps are carved into the mountainside, winding through increasingly ferocious weather, past standing stones inscribed with lessons for pilgrims. Each stone tells a piece of the old Nordic philosophy, the idea that the voice is a gift meant for wisdom rather than destruction. The wind gets stronger as you climb. The snow gets deeper. The temperature drops to the kind of cold that has a texture to it, something almost furry in the sinuses. High Hrothgar sits near the summit, vast and gray and somehow both ancient and permanent, as if it was not built, so much as it was always there, and the mountains simply formed around it. Inside, it is unexpectedly peaceful. Stone floors, candles burning in alcoves. The Greybeards themselves moving through the corridors with that particular slowness that is not weakness but the opposite. the slowness of people who have so much control that they no longer need to be in a hurry. Arngeir is the one who speaks to you. The others, Bori, Wulfgar, and Einarth, maintain their silence because every word they speak in the dragon tongue is a small reshaping of the world around them, and they have learned over centuries that carelessness costs things that cannot be returned. Arngeir explains this to you in plain speech, the lesser tongue, and even through the translation, something of the weight of the idea comes through. These men are not monks who chose silence because it seemed holy. They are men who have become so powerful that silence is the most responsible choice available to them. The training sequence in the way of the voice is simple by game design standards. You learn a shout, you demonstrate it, but what the quest is actually doing is something more interesting. It is explaining, through the medium of doing, what it means to possess the dragon tongue. You are not casting a spell. You are not firing a weapon. You are saying a word, a real word, in a real language, and the word is producing a change in reality because the language you are speaking is the one in which reality was written. The graybeards nod. Arngeir watches you with those deep-set eyes that have seen things you cannot imagine and says, simply, that you have the gift. The horn of Jürgen Windcaller sends you to Ustengrav, a burial tomb in the marshes of Hjalmarch, to retrieve the ceremonial horn of the man who founded the graybeard philosophy. It is a gorgeous dungeon, all green-glowing luminescent plants and rising water and the bones of ancient Nords who came here to rest and found that rest was exactly what they got. The puzzle gates in Ustengrav are one of those small design touches that Skyrim does brilliantly, the kind of puzzle that is elegant rather than frustrating. But the horn is gone when you arrive. In its place, a note. A small piece of folded paper sitting in the stone chest where a legendary artifact should be, and the note tells you to rent a specific room at a specific inn, the Sleeping Giant Inn in Riverwood. The room is called the Attic Room, and when you rent it from the innkeeper Delphine, she leads you down to a secret chamber hidden beneath the floor. And there she is, a small woman with close-cropped hair and eyes that have been watching the world carefully for a very long time, who introduces herself finally by handing you the horn and explaining that she already knew you were Dragonborn, that she has been looking for you, and that a much larger story is about to begin. But first, she wants you to take her to a dragon burial mound. Drop a comment down below and let me know where in the world you are right now and what time it is where you're sitting. Whether it's 2 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning, whether you're in bed or on a couch or somewhere in between, I love knowing where these stories are landing. And if you haven't subscribed yet, the button is right there. It costs you nothing and it helps more than you know. Section 2. Alduin's Wall, the Embassy, and the End of the World. Delphine's plan is, by the standards of plans involving ancient prophecy and returning dragons, reasonably straightforward. She wants to see a dragon resurrected in person because she has a theory that the resurrections are related to something more than natural dragon behavior, and she needs confirmation before she is willing to explain the rest of what she knows. So, the two of you ride out to Kynes Grove, a small settlement east of Windhelm, where an ancient burial mound sits on the hillside above a small mining operation, and you wait. The mound stirs. Alduin descends from the sky, that black shape against the clouds, and he lands on the mound, and he speaks, and the earth obeys him. The dragon rises from the ground like something being unburied by the planet itself, shaking off the dirt of centuries, stretching wings that have been folded for thousands of years, and the sound of it, the deep structural rumble of something very old becoming very present, is genuinely unsettling. This is the quest called A Blade in the Dark, and it is the point at which the stakes become personal. You are not just a person with a special gift. You are the only person in the world who can stop what is clearly a systematic resurrection of an ancient army. Delphine says, over the body of the freshly killed dragon, whose soul you've just absorbed, that she is one of the last of the blades, and then she takes you to Skyhaven Temple. Getting to Skyhaven Temple requires completing the quest called Alduin's Wall, which involves navigating Karthspire, a canyon deep in the Reach that is populated by Forsworn, those scattered, painted, feather-wearing fighters who are, as the lore will eventually make clear, fighting for territory that was genuinely stolen from their ancestors, making them simultaneously terrifying and entirely comprehensible. The temple itself is hidden behind a series of ancient Akaviri puzzles, stone floors carved with serpent designs that you must activate in sequence, a rotating ring with symbols that need to be aligned just so. And then the door opens, and you walk into a chamber that has been sealed for centuries, and there it is, Alduin's Wall. Esbern is already there, having been retrieved from his paranoid, cobwebbed existence in Riften's Ratway, and the old man's voice breaks slightly as he walks along the carved stone frieze, reading thousands of years of history in a single room. He points out the Akaviri warriors on the left, the dragons they fought, the figure of what must be the Dragonborn. He translates, he explains. The wall tells a story about a time when mortals used an Elder Scroll to banish Alduin through time itself, hurling the World Eater forward through the ages rather than killing him, because they couldn't kill him, because some things don't die the usual way. And somewhere, written in the stone, is the hint of a shout that can bring Alduin down. But they don't know that shout. The next piece of the puzzle requires learning what weapon the ancient Nords used against Alduin, which requires talking to the Greybeards, which requires returning to High Hrothgar, where Arngeir reveals, reluctantly, that there is a shout called Dragonrend, but neither the Greybeards nor anyone currently alive knows it. The only people who knew it were the ancient Nords who invented it, and the only way to learn it from them is to do something that should not be possible. You need to go back in time. The quest Alduin's Bane is one of the most conceptually audacious things in Skyrim. At the summit of the throat of the world, there is an Elder Scroll, waiting exactly where the ancient Nords left it thousands of years ago after they used it to banish Alduin. If you read the scroll at the specific magical convergence point at the summit, you will be pulled back through time to witness the original banishment. You will stand in the snow of a Skyrim that existed before most of its current civilization, and you will watch the heroes of an earlier age, Hakon One-Eye, and Gurmlith Goldenhilt and Feldir the Old, battle Alduin in this same place. You will hear Dragonrend spoken for the first time, and by hearing it, by being present as a Dragonborn in the moment of its creation, you will absorb it. Then the vision ends, and Alduin himself is there, because of course he is, and you have to face him. Dragonrend forces Alduin to land. It cuts him off from his connection to the flow of time, and drags him into the present moment in a way that appears to cause him something that works like pain. But he escapes. He flies. He is wounded, but not defeated. Not yet. The quest season unending is worth mentioning here, though it's technically optional. It's a peace conference held at High Hrothgar, the Greybeards acting as neutral hosts, while Imperial generals and Stormcloak commanders sit across a table from each other and are invited to stop killing one another long enough for you to handle the existential dragon threat. The negotiation is difficult, because everyone at that table has legitimate grievances, and none of them particularly want to make concessions, and you are forced to broker a deal that will satisfy nobody fully. It is one of the quieter quests in the game, but one of the most politically sophisticated. The way the Greybeards turn their monastery into neutral ground, the way Arngeir facilitates without taking sides, the way each faction representative holds the other in visible contempt while still showing up, because the alternative is a dragon eating everyone. All of it feels true in the way that only complicated situations involving people with incompatible histories can feel true. The diplomatic immunity quest is something else entirely. Delphine has concluded that the Thalmor, the powerful Aldmeri organization currently occupying the diplomatic spaces of Skyrim through the White Gold Concordat, knows something about the dragon resurrections. Specifically, she believes they might actually be behind them. To find out, you need to infiltrate the Thalmor embassy, which is hosting a party, which means you need to attend as a guest, which means you need to dress for the occasion, surrender your weapons at the door, and spend 30 minutes making polite conversation with the people who have been systematically hunting down anyone who worships Talos, all while quietly locating a way into the restricted areas. The sequence in the embassy is one of Skyrim's most purely enjoyable stretches of gameplay, not because it is mechanically brilliant, but because the atmosphere is so perfectly calibrated. The Thalmor move through the party with that particular entitled confidence. Ambassador Elenwyn hosts with icy graciousness. Other guests drink and talk and are mostly irrelevant. And you are working, slipping a key off a table, finding an excuse to exit the main hall, descending into the lower levels where the filing is kept and the interrogations happen, and the truth of what the Thalmor actually know begins to emerge. They are not behind the dragon resurrections. Their files confirm this with something approaching embarrassment on their behalf. They have no idea what is causing the dragons to return, and they are bothered by this because they like knowing things. But the files contain something else. Intelligence on a man named Esbern, one of the last blades, and intelligence on a man who has become an unwitting asset, whose name you will recognize. There is also an interrogation happening in the basement. A man named Etienne Rarnus who knows things the Thalmor want. You can free him. You probably will. The escape from the embassy, once things inevitably go loud, is the kind of running through a burning building chaos that Skyrim does so well, where the plan disintegrates and the improvisation begins, and somehow you come out the other side with the information you came for and the exact number of arrows in you that you should not actually be able to survive. By the time the main quest reaches its climax, several more threads have been gathered in. The companions of Jorvaskr know where Sovngarde is, because they have people who have come close enough to death to almost touch it. The ancient Nords who fought Alduin are resting in Sovngarde, which is both the Nordic afterlife and the place where Alduin has been feeding on souls, growing stronger on the spiritual matter of people who should have been at peace. The quest, The Fallen, involves capturing a dragon named Odaviing by luring him to Dragon's Reach, the great hall whose original purpose was, centuries ago, exactly that. Balgruuf gives you permission to use it. The chain in the ceiling of Dragon's Reach is still there after all this time. Odaviing is captured, furious, and then slowly becomes cooperative when you point out that Alduin has been devouring the souls of his kin as well as his enemies, and that something about this, to a dragon, feels like a betrayal of the deepest kind. He tells you where the portal to Sovngarde is. And then you go. The quest Sovngarde is quiet in the way that only a place that has been waiting patiently for you can be quiet. The portal opens into a misty fjord, a great valley with the Hall of Valor in the distance. And the light here is different, golden and timeless, the light of a place that exists slightly outside of ordinary duration. There are ancient warriors here, real ones. People who died centuries ago doing things worth dying for, and who have been resting in this earned peace until Alduin began preying on them. The three ancient heroes who knew Dragonrend are here too, willing now to fight alongside you in the final confrontation, their ancient enmity with the World Eater unchanged by the passage of 1,000 years. Alduin's defeat in Sovngarde is the ending of the main quest line, and it is handled with a kind of restraint that the moment deserves. No cutscene, no long speech. Alduin is destroyed, his soul unraveling rather than being absorbed, because some things should not be captured, only ended. The heroes of Sovngarde speak briefly. The world is quieter. You go home. Section 3. The Companions. Wolves in the Hall of Honor, you find the Companions fighting a giant. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. You walk up the road outside Whiterun, and there they are, a group of 4 or 5 warriors in mismatched armor doing exactly that. And the casualness of it, the way they treat what would be a genuinely alarming situation as basically an afternoon errand, is your first real introduction to who the Companions are. Ayla the Huntress is loose-limbed and precise, her archery as much instinct as training. Farkas is built like a small fortress and seems faintly amused by everything. Rhea, the newest member, is enthusiastic in a way that hasn't yet been tempered by enough close calls. You can join in. If you do, they'll nod and move on, and eventually Codlac Whitemane will hear about the newcomer who helped out and extend an invitation. Joining the Companions involves completing a series of proving missions that get gradually more interesting as the questline develops. You prove yourself by doing the work, clearing out bandits, delivering things that need delivering, occasionally stopping something that shouldn't be allowed to continue. The Companions operate out of Whiterun's Jorvaskr, the ancient mead hall that is also the overturned boat that Ysgramor himself dragged up from the coast. Sitting in that hall, drinking at those long tables with people who have been fighting together long enough to move like a single organism, you get a sense of what the organization is at its core. It is a warrior guild, yes, but it is also a family, and families have secrets. The secret of the Companions is introduced gradually, and for a long time it operates purely as atmosphere. Whispers in corridors, locks on doors, members of the Inner Circle, the group called the Circle, disappearing for nights that they don't explain in the morning. When Skjor and Ayla take you on a covert mission to raid a Silver Hand camp, you find that these are not ordinary bandits. The Silver Hand hunts werewolves. They know where to look, and they are looking at the companions. The Quest. The Silver Hand is where the secret breaks open. The circle gathers in the Underforge, a cave beneath Jorrvaskr where a moonlit pool sits in the stone, and Ayla tells you what you already half suspected. Kodlak calls it a disease. Ayla calls it a gift. Both of them are right. The beast blood of Hircine runs through the circle's veins, passed down through generations of leadership, making them stronger and faster and more terrifying in the dark hours, but also sealing them from Sovngarde. For Kodlak, this is the unbearable part. He is old. He has lived a warrior's life, an honorable one by any reasonable measurement, and he wants what he has earned. He wants the mead hall and the fire and the eternal company of those who went before him, and he cannot have it as long as the wolf is in him. He has been researching a cure. He believes he has found a path to one. He dies before he can walk it. The Silver Hand attacks Jorrvaskr and kills Kodlak Whitemane, and the grief that rolls through the companions is the kind that comes with shock mixed into it. The inability to believe that something this permanent could happen this fast. The quest to glory of the dead involves recovering Kodlak's ashes and the fragments of a Glenmoral witch's head, following his research notes, and performing a ritual in the deepest chamber of Ysgramor's tomb to free his wolf spirit from his soul so that it cannot follow him into the afterlife. It works. Kodlak's spirit appears in the tomb, wolf-free and at peace, and he tells you what he wanted to say, what he had been saving up to say for years, about the nature of strength and the value of honor and the things that matter when the fighting is done. And then he goes to Sovngarde, and the companions stand around his final resting place in the cold of that deep tomb, and the silence holds all of the weight it should hold. The werewolf mechanics themselves, the transformation sequence, the howl that scatters enemies, the great loping speed of the beast form, are among Skyrim's most purely enjoyable pieces of gameplay. But what the companion's questline really earns is the context. The beast blood is not just a power, it is a choice with real costs, chosen differently by different people based on what they believe matters. Ayla chooses the wolf because she believes in Hircine's realm, the hunting grounds, as a worthy afterlife for a hunter. Kodlak rejected it because his Nordic heart wanted Sovngarde. Farkas feels no particular anxiety about it one way or another, and you can choose, after the questline concludes, to be cured or to keep the gift, and both choices make complete sense depending on who you have decided you are. After Kodlak's burial, there is a moment where the companions simply sit in Jorrvaskr together. The harbor of it, the deliberate stillness after everything that has just happened, is one of those moments Skyrim sometimes constructs almost by accident, where all the mechanical elements conspire to create something that feels genuinely human. They toast Kodlak. They are quiet. Outside, Whiterun goes about its business. The world continues. You become Harbinger, the leader who is not a leader, but a first among equals, carrying forward an organization that is thousands of years old and has outlasted empires, which is perhaps the truest measure of a warrior guild's worth. There is a follow-up thread worth mentioning, technically a series of radiant quests, but weighted with enough story to deserve acknowledgement. Ayla can send you into Hircine's hunting grounds to retrieve a fragment of lost knowledge, or to track down targets in the wild. These missions have the particular atmosphere of working with someone who has made absolute peace with what she is, who runs at night with the wind in her fur, and sees no contradiction between that and serving alongside people who sleep under stone roofs and drink warm mead in firelight. Ayla the Huntress is one of Skyrim's most complete supporting characters, a person whose beliefs and history and present-day choices all cohere into something that feels earned. The companions also offer marriage, if that is something you want, and Ayla will say yes with the same direct, unornamented certainty that she brings to everything else she does. Section 4. The Dark Brotherhood. Blood and starlight and the sound of a door. The Dark Brotherhood questline begins not with shadows or daggers or whispered contracts, but with a child. You can find Aventus Aretino in Windhelm if you follow rumors or talk to the right people, a small boy who has locked himself in his family home and has been performing a ritual for days. When you get inside, you find him kneeling before an effigy made of bones and nightshade and flesh, chanting the Black Sacrament, and he looks up at you with the particular desperation of someone who has been ignored by every official channel and has decided to try something that everyone agrees is deeply inadvisable. He thought you were an assassin. He is relieved that you are. He wants you to kill Grelid the Kind. Grelid the Kind runs Honor Hall Orphanage in Riften, and she is a cruel woman, the kind whose cruelty has calcified over decades into something she no longer recognizes as cruelty, who beats children and shouts at children and denies them basic warmth, and has convinced herself that this is raising them correctly. The quest Innocence Lost is, structurally, a simple assassination. You find Grelod, you kill her. The children cheer, which is funny and awful in exactly equal measure, but it has consequences. Killing someone as part of a black sacrament that someone else performed, even though you are not a Dark Brotherhood member, attracts attention. You rent a room at an inn, go to sleep, and wake up in a shack somewhere in the dark, with 3 hooded figures kneeling in front of you, and a woman's voice saying, from the shadows near the door, that someone has been bad. Astrid is the leader of the Dark Brotherhood's Falkreath Sanctuary, and she is, from the first moment you meet her, one of the most compelling characters in the game. She is charismatic and pragmatic and deeply attached to the family she has built in this small group of killers, so attached to it that she will, eventually, do something catastrophically wrong in the name of protecting it. But that comes later. For now, she has 3 hooded prisoners and a game. One of them has a contract on their head. She doesn't know which one. You are to kill one, and if you pick correctly, you may leave. If you pick incorrectly, you also leave, because Astrid is testing your instincts as much as your willingness. And there's a certain category of brilliant person who can be taught anything except the talent that makes it worth teaching. The Dark Brotherhood questline proceeds through a series of contracts, each one distinct and carefully characterized. The quest Morning Never Comes involves eliminating Nilsine Shattershield in Windhelm as a secondary target, which connects to the Blood on the Ice murder investigation, running parallel to it in a way that Skyrim rarely acknowledges, but which gives the city of Windhelm a layered complexity when you notice it. The quest Bound Until Death involves assassinating Vittoria Vici during her wedding in solitude, and the choice of when to do it, publicly during the ceremony for a bonus reward, or privately at some other moment, is less a gameplay choice than a character test. Whispers in the Dark is the quest where everything begins to shift. Astrid suspects Cicero of plotting against her. Cicero, the jester, the Nightingale's keeper, the small, mad figure in the painted face who has been carrying the Night Mother's coffin across Tamriel for years, because there was nobody else to do it, and he believed in the old ways, even when the old ways had been almost entirely forgotten. Astrid asks you to hide in the Night Mother's coffin and listen. You do, and then the Night Mother speaks to you, not to Cicero, to you. The listener is the one who hears the Night Mother, and the Night Mother has been waiting for a listener for a very long time. She has a contract for you, from a man named Amand Motier, who wants something done that requires exactly the kind of organization the Dark Brotherhood provides. He wants the Emperor of Tamriel killed. The questline that follows, from the contract meeting at Valen Rude to the escalating plan to reach Titus Mede II, is one of the most narratively sophisticated things in Skyrim. You attend a wedding, make a banquet poisoned, infiltrate a ship. The quest to kill an empire involves actually reaching the Emperor's decoy, because, of course, there's a decoy, and the conversation you have with the decoy before the Brotherhood realizes the mistake has a quiet poetry to it. The man is tired of being the Emperor's stand-in. He has been wearing another man's face in a dangerous world for years, and he is not afraid of you, and you get the impression he might be faintly relieved. But then Astrid makes her mistake. She sells you to the Penitus Oculatus. She contacts Commander Morrow and offers him the listener, the person who has been handling the Emperor contract, in exchange for the Brotherhood being left alone. It is the kind of decision that people make when they love something they have built so much that they cannot see clearly what their love is costing. Astrid built the Falkreath Sanctuary. She shaped everyone in it. She is not willing to lose it to the Night Mother's old ways, to a religion she didn't choose, to a hierarchy that places a rotting corpse above her own authority. And so, she bargains with the people who want her dead, and she gives them someone she has come to respect, and she tells herself it is for the family. The Penitus Oculatus attacks the Falkreath Sanctuary while you are away on a contract. The death count in the aftermath, the empty hall, the burned-out rooms, the familiar faces that are no longer there, is handled with a restraint that makes it hit harder than it would have if the game had played it for spectacle. The Night Mother tells you that Astrid is still alive. You find her in the burning sanctuary, badly injured, holding the blade of woe in her ruined hands. She performs the Black Sacrament on herself. She asks you to end it. She tells you she was a fool. She gives you the dagger. The quest, Death Incarnate, ends with a funeral for the Brotherhood as it was, and the beginning of something new. Nazir and Babette, the two who escaped, move to the Dawnstar Sanctuary with you. The Night Mother comes with you. Cicero, if you spared him in the earlier quest, comes too, still wearing the Jester's paint, still loyal to whatever old true version of the Brotherhood exists in his head. The final quest, Hail Sithis, takes you to the real Emperor, Titus Mede II, aboard his ship the Kateria, which sits at anchor off the coast of Solitude. The approach to the Kateria at night is one of Skyrim's most atmospheric sequences, that long, low ship in the dark water, the lanterns reflected in the water below. You fight through the crew, descend to the Imperial quarters, and find Titus Mede II alone. He is not afraid of you either. He knows why you are there. He asks only one thing, that you find and kill whoever hired the Brotherhood to kill him. He seems genuinely curious about the contract. He has been Emperor long enough to understand that someone is always trying to kill you, and the more interesting question is always why. He composes himself, turns slightly, and waits. You find out afterward who hired the contract, Amand Motier, the same man who came to you with the original request, trying to tie up loose ends. Whether you collect on that loose end yourself is your choice. The game doesn't force it either way. The reward for completing the full Dark Brotherhood quest line is 20,000 gold, the Blade of Woe, the Jester's outfit from Cicero, and a sanctuary that you can rebuild with that 20,000 gold into something clean and operational again. But what you actually carry away from it is the shape of Astrid's tragedy, a woman who loved a family she had built and lost it trying to keep it, undone by the same protectiveness that made her worth following in the first place. Section 5. The Thieves' Guild, Shadows, Betrayal, and the Skeleton Key. Riften is the kind of city that smells like fish and money and old grudges. The canal that runs through its heart carries both commerce and secrets, and the people who live on its edges know the difference between what the city presents to the world and what it actually is, which are two very different places connected by a door in the floor of the Ragged Flagon. You meet Brynjolf first, usually in the market. He has that particular quality of a person who is always very slightly more relaxed than the situation warrants, which is either confidence or performance, and with Brynjolf, it is both simultaneously. He wants to know if you are interested in making some gold, and the way he says it, with that specific mix of invitation and assessment, is the opening note of one of the game's richest faction quest lines. The Thieves' Guild of Skyrim is in trouble. Not the visible kind of trouble that involves arrests and confiscations, but the deep structural kind that comes when luck runs out, when every job that should go right goes slightly wrong, when the ledgers don't balance and the clients drift away and the whole enterprise begins to feel held together with string. The guild has been in decline for years. Nobody knows exactly why. You find out eventually that the reason has a name: Mercer Frey. The questline begins with standard guild work, intimidating a merchant who owes fees, breaking into a honeymead operation called Honningbrew to plant evidence and eliminate its owner, infiltrating the wealthy Golden Glow estate, a bee farm out on a lake, to burn some hives and steal some documents. These early quests have the slightly warm familiarity of jobs in a world where theft is a profession, where the guild has its own ethics and its own honor code, and the shadow marks carved near buildings tell you things about the city that the guards will never know. The deeper story begins to emerge during the quest Scoundrel's Folly, when an informant named Gullum I leads you, reluctantly and with much complaining, toward the name Carlia. Then, Speaking with Silence takes you into Snowvale Sanctum with Mercer Frey himself, and things happen that reframe everything. Carlia shoots you with a poisoned arrow. You fall. Mercer Frey stands over you, explains what he has done in a voice completely stripped of remorse, and leaves you for dead. Carlia takes you to safety instead, because she needs you to understand something, and you need to be alive to understand it. She has spent 25 years being hunted for a murder she did not commit. Gallus Desidenius was the guildmaster and her lover, and the man who inducted her into the Nightingales. And Mercer Frey killed him and framed her for it because Gallus had discovered what Mercer was doing with the guild's treasury. The evidence has been in Gallus's encoded journal all this time. All Carlia has needed is someone willing to listen. The quest, Hard Answers, takes you to Markarth and to Calcelmo's tower, where the court wizard has amassed the only substantial knowledge of the ancient Falmer language in the province, secured behind locked doors and alerted guards, because Calcelmo is the kind of scholar who does not share his work until it is finished. You photograph his translation stone, which is to say you make a rubbing of it, and you return to the translator who can turn Gallus's journal into something readable. The journal is a record of Mercer Frey's betrayal. It describes how he stole the skeleton key, Nocturnal's artifact, from the Twilight Sepulchre. The skeleton key is not a lockpick that opens any lock, though it does that. It is the physical representation of Nocturnal's blessing on the guild, the source of the supernatural luck that made the Thieves' Guild successful beyond ordinary accounting. Without it, the guild's luck didn't just diminish, it inverted. Every job that should have worked didn't. Every fence that should have stayed bought didn't. Everything went sideways in the specific way that things go sideways when you have lost a blessing you didn't know you had. The pursuit involves breaking into Riftweald Manor, Mercer's private residence, in a quest that is equal parts burglary and revelation. His notes explain his next move. One last colossal theft, the Eyes of the Falmer, 2 enormous gemstones set into a Stone of Barenzier statue deep in an underwater Dwemer ruin, after which he intends to disappear. The Trinity Restored takes you to Nightingale Hall, where the three of you and Brynjolf and Carlia, take the Nightingale Oath before Nocturnal herself, becoming her agents in exchange for the skills and the armor and the specific kind of luck that comes with divine patronage. Blindsided is the confrontation in Urkungthand, a Dwemer ruin that is beautiful in that cold, bronze, water-streaked way that Dwemer ruins always are, the kind of beauty that comes from something built to outlast everyone who built it. You find Mercer at the Eyes of the Falmer in a vaulted chamber deep in the rock, and the fight that follows is more complex than a simple killing, because Mercer has the ability to turn invisible at will, and has used the skeleton key to grant himself an almost impossible number of abilities. He dies in a room filling with water, the Eyes of the Falmer floating loose in the flood, and you take them and swim out before the chamber seals completely. Darkness Returns is the final quest, and it is, structurally, one of the quietest endings any faction quest line in Skyrim has. You travel to the Twilight Sepulchre, a sacred space that has been in Nocturnal's service since before recorded history, and you walk the Pilgrim's Path, a series of chambers filled with traps and guardians, and the accumulated spiritual weight of a place that has been tended by devoted people for centuries. At the end, you return the skeleton key to its place. Nocturnal herself appears, briefly, to acknowledge what you have done. She is not warm. Nocturnal is not a warm deity. She is the void, the shadow, the patron of things that operate in the absence of light, and her gratitude manifests as a reinstatement of favor rather than anything so human as thanks. But there is something in that reinstatement that feels significant. The guild's luck returns. The balance tips back. In the Ragged Flagon, things start going right again in the small, steady way that they used to. Brynjolf installs you as guildmaster in a short ceremony that is probably the least ceremonious ceremony in the game, conducted in the cistern with a few thieves watching without particular enthusiasm, which is exactly right for an organization whose relationship with formal ritual is fundamentally complicated. The Thieves' Guild has a secondary thread through the quest line that is worth dwelling on: the city influence quests. Delvin Mallory and Vex send you to Windhelm and Markarth and Solitude and Whiterun to run specific jobs that rebuild the guild's presence in each city. These quests are not individually remarkable, but cumulatively they map the guild back onto Skyrim's political geography in a way that feels like watching something recover. You are not just completing objectives. You are re-establishing the invisible infrastructure of an organization that was almost completely dismantled by one man's greed. The Thieves' Guild questline's emotional core is, in the end, about what betrayal costs over time. Mercer's betrayal cost the guild 25 years. It cost Carlia her name and her freedom. It cost Gallus his life. And the recovery, the slow rebuilding, the return of Nocturnal's favor, all of it takes exactly as long as it takes, no faster, because that is how trust is rebuilt. Section 6. The College of Winterhold. Frost, fire, and things man was not meant to study. The College of Winterhold sits at the very edge of the province, on a promontory above the frozen sea of ghosts, connected to the town of Winterhold by a bridge that the town blames for everything. The Great Collapse, a coastal disaster that swallowed most of old Winterhold into the sea decades ago, left the college standing while the city crumbled, and the residents of what remains of the town have never stopped drawing a line between those two facts, even though there is no actual evidence connecting them. Faralda guards the bridge, and she has a test. You either demonstrate that you can already cast a spell, or she asks you a question about your magical aptitude, and the test is different depending on who you are in the game. It is a small thing, but a considered one. The college has standards, not prohibitive ones, but some. The main hall of the college, the Hall of the Elements, is a high circular chamber with a permanent magical phenomenon in the ceiling, a kind of aurora made solid, shifting, and slow, colored with the particular blue that appears in deep ice or deep magic. Student mages stand at their practice stations. Faculty move between classes. There is a rhythm to the place that has been built over generations of people who chose to live at the edge of the world in pursuit of something you cannot hold in your hands. The quest line begins gently. First lessons, the opening quest, involves a field exercise at the ancient ruins of Sarthal, which are located in the hills outside Winterhold, and were the first human settlement in Skyrim before the Night of Tears disaster that the companion's questline references obliquely. Sarthal is enormous underground, far larger than its surface footprint suggests, and it is home to something that nobody expected to find there. Under the ice is the discovery, during that field exercise, of an artifact that has been sealed in the ruins for an age. A crystalline sphere, golden, humming with a presence that is not hostile exactly, but is certainly not passive. Tolfdir, the elderly conjuration master, is delighted and alarmed in equal measure, which is a proportionally correct response to finding something you cannot identify. The Eye of Magnus, as it comes to be known, is taken back to the college for study. This is the mistake. The quest line moves through a series of escalating revelations. Hitting the book sends you to 3 dangerous locations to retrieve specific tomes about the eye. Containment involves dealing with magical anomalies that begin appearing in the city when Ancano, the Thalmor representative assigned to the college as a diplomatic observer, starts getting interested in the artifact in ways that exceed polite academic curiosity. The quest line reveals the Sigic Order, an organization older than the college, older than most of Skyrim's institutions, who communicate to you through visions and time-stopped conversations that no one else can see or hear, warning you that things are moving toward a crisis that you are the only one positioned to address. Ancano is a Thalmor agent first, and a student of magic second, and a reasonable person never. He is not personally evil in the cartoonish sense, but he is ideologically certain in a way that makes him dangerous, convinced that the Eye's power belongs to the Aldmeri Dominion, that the college is a resource to be leveraged, and that the Archmage Savos Aran is an obstacle to be circumvented rather than a person to be respected. When he makes his move, seizing the Eye and channeling it, the Archmage dies in the resulting explosion of uncontrolled magical force, and the Hall of the Elements is sealed behind a barrier that nothing conventional can penetrate. The Staff of Magnus is in Labyrinthian. Labyrinthian is one of Skyrim's finest dungeons, sprawling and thematically rich, full of Draugr and dragon priests and the echoing voices of past expeditions that went badly. The Archmage's personal pendant is the key. As you explore, you hear Savos Aran's voice at various points, a kind of temporal echo of a journey he made to Labyrinthian years ago as a student, a journey that went very wrong, in which he sacrificed every member of his expedition, trapping them in the tomb to maintain a ward on the most dangerous prisoner inside it. The dragon priest Morike wears the Staff of Magnus. He has been standing in the dark at the center of this ancient place, draining the life from the trapped echoes of Savos Aran's former companions for decades. The guilt of what Savos Aran did to retrieve knowledge he then spent his whole career keeping secret is one of those background tragedies that Skyrim embeds so deep into its environments that many players miss it entirely, which makes it more rather than less devastating when you find it. With the Staff of Magnus, you break Ancano's barrier and face him in the Hall of the Elements. The fight itself is more mechanical puzzle than climax, using the staff to close the eye and interrupt Ancano's connection to it, then dealing damage in the windows that creates. When he falls, the Psijic order appears, all of them at once, moving through the space with that unhurried certainty of people for whom time is a navigable medium rather than a river. They take the eye. They congratulate you. They leave. Tolfdir, who has been standing in all of this chaos with the stolid dependability of a man who has outlasted several extremely dramatic events and expects to outlast several more, gives you the Archmage's robes and the claw to the Archmage's quarters. You are now the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, which means you are the head of the most powerful magical institution in the province, responsible for the education and welfare of a collection of extremely talented and occasionally reckless scholars, none of whom will stop running dangerous experiments simply because you have told them to. The college has several secondary questlines worth dwelling on. The Arniel's Endeavor chain follows a researcher attempting to recreate the Dwemer disappearance in miniature, using a soul gem as a proxy for the heart of Lorcan. His experiment works, in the sense that he vanishes exactly as the Dwemer vanished, which was not what either of you was hoping for. His translucent shade appears afterward to help you occasionally, existing in some state between presence and absence that feels like a terrible answer to the question he was asking. Onmund's Request is a smaller story about a young Nord student who sold a family amulet to Enthir, the college's fence and general connector of people with needs, and wants it back. The negotiation for the amulet's return involves doing Enthir a favor, which is how most things at the college actually get done, and the emotional payoff of returning something of personal significance to a young man who is far from home and not entirely sure of his welcome is proportionally small and proportionally exact. Jazargo's experiment involves field testing a set of scrolls that the Khajiit student has developed for use against the undead. He hasn't told you what the scrolls actually do. You find out in the field. Jazargo is brilliant and charismatic, and has a student's relationship with ethics that the faculty has been meaning to address for some time. And Berlina's practice involves being the test subject for a young Dunmer student's attempts at applying a transformation spell, with results that include you temporarily seeing everything in the wrong colors and then briefly becoming a horse, which she is mortified about, and you are encouraged to interpret charitably. Section 7. The Daedric Princes, 16 doors into something older than the world. Before there was a world, there was chaos, and from that chaos, specific and terrible intelligences arose, beings of a power and a permanence that the mortal races could not match, but could, cautiously and at significant personal risk, engage with. 16 Daedric princes leave their mark on Skyrim through 16 quests, each one a small window into a different cosmological philosophy, and collectively they constitute some of the most morally complex and atmospherically distinctive content the game contains. Let's start with the ones who are, by most measures, the least terrible. Azura's shrine sits on a hilltop south of Winterhold, a tall statue with her arms spread against the sky, her priestess Aranea Yenith standing below in the cold, waiting for the Dragonborn with the particular patience of someone who has seen prophecy and knows you are coming. The Black Star begins when Aranea explains that Azura's soul gem, the artifact that allows infinite soul capture, has been stolen and corrupted by a mage named Malin Varen, who attempted to use it to achieve a form of immortality by transferring his own soul into it. This has gone predictably badly for Malin and necessitates entering the gem to deal with him. At the end, you have a choice. Give the purified gem to Azura, receiving the standard version that captures only lesser souls, or give it to Nelacar, the Winterhold mage who explains that Azura's version is weaker and that the Black Star, which captures human souls, is mechanically superior. The choice is less interesting for its consequences than for what it says about how you relate to the divine. Azura is as close to benevolent as the Daedric princes get, but even she operates on terms that are not exactly equal. Nelacar's offer is a rejection of those terms. Both options are defensible. Meridia's quest, the Break of Dawn, begins when you find her beacon, a glowing gem that most players discover in a dungeon chest, and she announces herself with a golden voice that is not asking questions. She is the Prince of Life and Light, and something abominable has moved into her temple. A necromancer named Malkorin, who has been raising the dead using the souls of soldiers who died in the area. Meridia hates the undead with a theological specificity that goes beyond mere preference into something that feels almost personal, and she wants her temple cleansed and her artifact retrieved. The quest is structurally simple and visually extraordinary. The temple itself, Kilcreath, is all white stone and streaming light. The puzzle mechanics involving positioning reflectors to channel beams through a series of chambers. At the end, Meridia literally lifts you into the sky above her temple to present the Dawnbreaker, a sword that pulses with golden light and explodes the undead. The sky sequence is one of the most striking visual moments in the game, and Meridia's voice in that moment, confident and a little imperious and entirely uninterested in being thanked, is perfectly characterized. The Mind of Madness is Sheogorath's quest, and it begins in solitude with a ragged man named Dervanin who is searching for his missing master and will give you his master's walking stick, which serves as your entry into the Pelagius Wing of the Blue Palace. The Pelagius Wing has been sealed for years. Nobody goes in. Something happened there, and the palace staff have been quietly hoping that if they don't mention it, the problem will either solve itself or at least remain contained. The problem, of course, is Sheogorath, Prince of Madness, who has been using the abandoned wing as a personal vacation destination for some unspecified but clearly significant amount of time. He is having tea. He is very pleased to see you. He has a task for you. Cure the madness of King Pelagius the Mad, who exists in this in-between space between life and death, trapped in the particular nightmares of a man who was legendarily, profoundly, historically unwell. The quest takes place inside Pelagius's mind, a surreal landscape of nightmare imagery rendered in Skyrim's engine with a kind of gleeful disregard for the usual rules of environment design. You assist with various manifestations of Pelagius's psychological architecture, meeting a version of him as a child, addressing his paranoia by introducing the two halves of it to each other, putting his nightmares to sleep. Sheogorath narrates from the sidelines with the warmth of someone who finds all of this enormously entertaining and would be perfectly happy for it to continue forever. The reward is the Wabbajack, and more importantly, the sense that you have just spent 45 minutes somewhere that Skyrim's engine was not designed to support, but somehow managed anyway. A Night to Remember is Sanguine's quest, and it begins in a tavern with a drinking contest you are invited to lose. You wake up somewhere unexpected with no memory of the previous evening, and a list of things you apparently did that are, by any measure, a lot. The quest reconstruction of the previous night takes you to a Hograven's lair, a temple in Markarth, and a goat that has been formally promised to a giant. The tone is deliberately absurdist, a comedy running inside a game that usually takes its mythology very seriously, and it lands. The Sanguine Rose, which summons a Dremora, is the reward, but the quest is really about proving that not every interaction with a Daedric prince needs to end in existential horror. Hircine's quest, Ill Met by Moonlight, begins in Falkreath's jail, where a werewolf named Sinding is awaiting execution for killing a child. He stole Hircine's ring because he wanted to control his transformations. This didn't work. Hircine wants the ring back, and he wants Sinding dead. The moral complexity of the quest is genuine. Sinding is not evil. He is a man who killed a child because his disease overtook him, and he did not have the tools to prevent it. He is remorseful in the specific way that is worse than not being remorseful, because it accomplishes nothing. You can help Hircine hunt him, or you can turn on the hunters and defend him. Hircine will reward you either way, because what Hircine values is the quality of the hunt rather than its specific outcome. Boethia's Calling is one of the darkest quests in the game. The Prince of Deceit and Conspiracy asks for the sacrifice of a follower, someone who trusts you, at her shrine. There is no non-violent way to do this. You bring someone to a pillar, initiate a trap, and they die on it. The quest then sends you on a mission to eliminate the current champion of Boethia, and the reward is the Ebony Mail, which is both excellent armor and a reminder of what you just did. The quest exists to test whether you will do what Boethia asks. Many players refuse. The game does not penalize the refusal. Molag quest, the House of Horrors, begins in Markarth when a vigilant of Stendar named Tyrannus asks for your help investigating an abandoned house. Inside, the house reveals itself to belong to Molag, Prince of Domination and Enslavement, and the only way to progress is to kill Tyrannus. The quest then requires you to find a priest of Boethia named Logrolf the Willful and bring him back to the altar, where you beat him with a rusted mace until Molag is satisfied. There is no diplomatic solution. The Mace of Molag is the reward, enchanted with stamina and magicka drain plus soul trap. It is one of the best weapons in the game. It is also one of the most clearly evil questlines. The game makes both of these things true simultaneously without seeming to need them resolved. Namira's quest, A Taste of Death, begins with a request to investigate disappearing bodies from Markarth's Hall of the Dead, which eventually leads to an underground banquet where the guests eat human flesh in service to a prince who finds civilized taboos interesting precisely because of what it takes to break them. The Ring of Namira, which allows you to feed on corpses for health regeneration, is mechanically useful for certain playstyles. The questline is designed to make you aware of exactly what kind of thing you are considering when you equip it. Vermina's quest, Waking Nightmare, is set in Dawnstar, a harbor town plagued by nightmares. Everyone in Dawnstar has been having the same bad dreams for weeks, the kind that get worse the longer they continue, and a priest of Mara has arrived to help, but hasn't made progress. The true source is Vermina's artifact, the Skull of Corruption, which is sitting in a nearby Nordic ruin and emanating nightmare energy. The quest involves a priest of Vermina who has been working in the area and a moral choice at the end about whether to kill him or save him, complicated by the fact that saving him means allowing Vermina's influence to continue, while killing him means deciding that he is responsible for what his prince has done through him. Periite's quest, The Only Cure, involves a group of worshippers who tried to offer their souls to the Prince of Pestilence and ended up simply trapped, their bodies walking around in a kind of waking plague state, while their souls are held in Periite's realm. You need to retrieve them through a vision state involving a specific alchemical concoction, navigate Periite's plane, and return with the means to end the suffering of these people who made a terrible choice in full knowledge of what they were doing. Clavicus Vile's quest, A Daedra's Best Friend, involves finding a dog named Barbas, who is actually a manifestation of Clavicus Vile's own power in animal form, who left the prince because they were fighting. Barbas wants to go home. Clavicus Vile wants to be reunited with his power, but also wants you to bring him a vampire hunter's axe, so that he can give it to someone who asked him for a weapon, and Vile finds contracts entertaining. At the end, you can give him Barbas, receiving the mask of Clavicus Vile, or keep the rusted axe, which is mechanically inferior and doesn't count toward the achievement. The choice is about whether you trust the prince to keep his word, which, with Clavicus Vile, is exactly the kind of question he enjoys having you ask. Hermaeus Mora, Prince of Knowledge and Fate, does not have a standalone quest in the base game in the same sense as the others. His presence runs through the Discerning the Transmundane quest line, which involves helping an eccentric scholar named Septimus Cygnus unlock a Dwemer lockbox that contains something the scholar believes is the heart of Lorcan. The quest sends you to harvest blood from all 5 of Tamriel's elven races. The endgame involves Septimus being absorbed into Apocrypha for completing his research, and Hermaeus Mora rewarding you with the Ogma Infinium, a book that grants instant mastery in a chosen skill tree. The book does not feel like a gift. It feels like an agreement, the terms of which you are not entirely clear on. Mephala quest, The Whispering Door, is a political intrigue locked behind level requirements. The Jarl of Whiterun's children are being corrupted by something, and the trail leads to a locked door in Dragon's Reach's depths that has been sealed because the last person who opened it came out changed in ways that concerned people who knew her before. Inside the locked door is a shrine to Mephala, Prince of Webs, Secrets, and Plots, and a weapon, the Ebony Blade, a two-handed sword that feeds on the trust of people who care about the wielder, growing stronger each time you use it to kill a companion or friend. The Whispering Door is one of those quests that requires you to choose between mechanical reward and moral clarity. Mehrunes Dagon's quest, Pieces of the Past, begins with fragments. Silas Vesuvius collects artifacts associated with Dagon's invasion during the Oblivion Crisis, and he wants the 3 pieces of Mehrunes' Razor, a legendary dagger whose enchantment carries a small chance to instantly kill any target regardless of their remaining health. The pieces are scattered in 3 locations, guarded by leveled enemies and the residual darkness of what the razor represents. At the end, Mehrunes Dagon asks you to kill Silas. The choice of whether to comply is genuinely uncomfortable because the quest has spent time making Silas feel like a person, and because declining means you don't get the razor fully restored, and because the Prince of Destruction is, obviously, going to ask this specific thing of you. And then there is the quest that isn't technically a Daedric quest, but functions like one, The Black Books of Solstheim in the Dragonborn DLC, Hermaeus Mora's domain expressed across a series of impossible libraries, but those belong to a later section of the night. Section 8, Dawnguard, the Vampire War and the Place Beyond the Sun. The Dawnguard questline begins with rumors of increased vampire activity and a notice about a reconstituted order of vampire hunters, and it starts early in the game, available from level 10 onward, drifting into your awareness through overheard conversations and roadside posters until you follow the thread to Fort Dawnguard. Fort Dawnguard sits at the end of a long valley in the Rift, accessible only by following a path that most players would never take if they weren't specifically looking. The fort itself has the feel of something recently reoccupied, walls repaired, forges running again, people moving through it with the particular energy of an organization that has just remembered what it is for. Isran is the leader, a man whose opinions on vampires are extreme by most measures, and entirely proportional by the specific standards of someone who has spent his life watching what vampires do to the people they encounter. He doesn't trust you. He doesn't particularly trust anyone. But he has a mission, and you have arrived, and pragmatism is the language he speaks most fluently. The first act of the Dawnguard questline involves a discovery in Dim Hollow Cavern, a woman sealed inside a stone sarcophagus by a mechanism that takes a pint of your blood to open. She wakes slowly, disoriented, and she introduces herself as Serana. Serana is extraordinary, not just as a character in the technical sense, voiced and written with unusual depth, but as a presence throughout the questline. She has been asleep for centuries. She doesn't know what has changed. She is a vampire, and she knows you know this, and she carries that knowledge with the specific dignity of someone who has accepted that who she is will matter to people before they know who she is. She wants to go home, to Castle Volkihar. She is carrying an Elder Scroll that she cannot tell you about yet. You can take her home. You probably will. And when you arrive at the castle on its island in the sea ice, and the great doors open, you have a choice to make. Lord Harkon is Serana's father, and he is one of the most fully realized antagonists in Skyrim. He is not simply evil. He is a man who has convinced himself, over centuries, that the vampire's perspective on the world is the correct one, that mortals are resources and vampires are their natural inheritors, and that the fact that his wife fled from him and his daughter was sealed in a tomb rather than remain at his side is simply a failure of their comprehension rather than any indication that he is wrong. He offers you his gift, his blood, transformation into a powerful vampire lord. The offer is sincere. He believes he is giving you something valuable. If you join the Dawnguard, you leave the castle, and the questline proceeds from Isran's fortress. If you accept Harkon's gift, you stay, and the questline proceeds from within the vampire court, with slightly different dialogue and framing, but largely the same structural events. The quest that follows, the search for a moth priest, is a race between the Dawnguard and the vampires to locate a trained Elder Scroll reader before the other side does. Moth priests can read Elder Scrolls without going blind, which takes years of specific training, involving the consumption of moths and the rituals of a monastic order based in Cyrodiil. Finding one in Skyrim at this particular moment is fortunate. His name is Dexion Evikis, and the vampires have already found him and enthralled him when you arrive, and you either rescue him or complete the enthralling depending on your allegiance. Dexion's enthrallment, the way a person's will can be overwritten by vampire suggestion, and they continue to function in every superficial way while the deep structure of their own desire has been replaced, is one of the DELC's most unsettling implications. He is not harmed in the observable sense. He is walking and talking and performing the functions he was trained for, but the person doing them is not entirely there. The restoration of his will, if you free him, and his gratitude afterward, has the slightly dazed quality of someone who has been in a place they cannot fully describe, and has returned to find the ordinary world both more and less reassuring than they remembered. The 3 Elder Scrolls quest chain, collecting the Blood Scroll and the Sun Scroll to complement the one Serana carries, involves the College of Winterhold's archive and the conversation with Septimus Cygnus, whose broader implications connect to the discerning, the transmundane quest line. Urag Groshub, the college's librarian, will sell you the information you need in exchange for college standing and a fair amount of coin, because knowledge in Skyrim is always available but rarely free, And the college's collection has been accumulated over decades by a series of people who understood that information is the most durable asset an institution can own. The Ancestor Glade sequence, reading the scrolls together in the grove where ancestor moths still drift through filtered light between ancient trees, is Dawn Guard at its most visually and atmospherically complete. The ritual involves a special tool that removes bark from the trees in a specific pattern, drawing the moths to you, which then somehow enhance your perception of the scroll's content. The explanation is not entirely satisfying in rational terms and does not need to be. What matters is that the light through the canopy is extraordinary, and the moths drift with that particular indifferent beauty of creatures that have no reason to care about your mission, but whose presence makes it feel sacred anyway. The full Lost to the Ages questline, available in Dawn Guard, sends you across multiple Dwemer ruins searching for Ethereum shards, the component pieces of a legendary forge that the Dwemer built in their greatest period of architectural ambition. Katria is the ghost of an adventurer who died pursuing this same quest, and she accompanies you through the search, her unfinished business providing the questline's emotional through-line. She is knowledgeable, direct, and frustrated in the specific way of someone who died one step short of completion and has been stuck in that incomplete moment ever since. When you reach the Ethereum Forge at the climax of the quest and create your chosen artifact, Katria's spirit is finally able to rest. The Ethereum crown, which she watches you create, is the last thing she sees before she goes. Whether she would have made the same choice for herself, she tells you, does not matter. She got to see it finished. That is enough. The Dawn Guard's fort itself, after the initial questline completes, becomes a base of operations where Isran runs what is increasingly a functional institution, rather than a one-man emergency response. The Radiant quests from Fort Dawn Guard, dispatching you to eliminate vampire covens and rescue enthralled citizens and retrieve ancient relics, represent the ongoing work of vampire hunting as a profession rather than a calling, and there is something clarifying about the transition from the urgency of the main quest to this steady, methodical rhythm of people doing difficult work in the knowledge that it will need to be done again tomorrow. The Elder Scroll he reads belongs to Serana and contains part of a prophecy called the Tyranny of the Sun. 2 more scrolls are needed for the complete picture, and acquiring them is the work of the questline's middle section. One is in the College of Winterhold's archive, purchased through an interaction with Urag Gro-Shub, the Orcish librarian who treats his collection with the fierce protectiveness of a parent. The other requires reconstructing the path to retrieve it, involving Septimus Cygnus in ways that have implications for the Discerning the Transmundane questline, if you have already completed that. Chasing Echoes sends you and Serana back into Castle Volkihar, through the ruined courtyard and into Valerica's private laboratory, searching for the 3rd scroll and for Serana's mother, who took it with her when she fled. The trail leads to a portal, and beyond the portal is the Soul Cairn. The Soul Cairn is one of Skyrim's most successful environmental achievements, an afterlife plane for souls that have been captured in black soul gems and used for enchanting, a gray-purple wasteland under a dim sky where the shades of the dead wander the edges of bone-white structures that serve no visible purpose. It is genuinely unsettling, in the way that a place can be unsettling when it looks like nothing you have seen before and everything you have feared. The architecture is wrong in some way that the eye notices before the mind articulates it. The colors are wrong. The light is wrong. It is the light of a place that does not have a sun. To enter without being a vampire, you either allow Serana to partially soul trap you, which weakens you during your time in the Soul Cairn, or you become a vampire lord before entering. This choice, small in mechanical terms, is significant in character terms. You are being asked whether you trust Serana enough to give her a piece of your soul as a temporary measure, or whether you would rather permanently alter what you are than take that risk. Valerica is in the Soul Cairn, imprisoned in a structure she built herself to keep herself safe from Harkon's agents, who have been trying to reach her for centuries. She is not immediately warm to you. She is warm to Serana, in the particular way of a parent who expected never to see her child again, and has adjusted herself to that absence, and is now trying to readjust in real time. The conversation between Serana and her mother is one of the questline's emotional peaks, quiet and loaded with the kind of history that exists in families where large things have gone unsaid for too long. There is also Arvak in the Soul Cairn. A wandering shade will ask you to find his horse's skull, which is scattered somewhere in the gray wastes. You find it, you reunite Shade and Horse. The horse can then be summoned by you anywhere in the world, an undead stallion who glows faintly blue, and who, by most practical measures, is the finest horse in Skyrim. The quest is short and unrelated to the main story, and is there purely because some stories deserve to be told, even when they are small. Beyond Death recovers Velarika's Elder Scroll. Unseen Visions reads the 3 scrolls together in a ceremony at Ancestor Glade, a grove in the Rift where ancestor moths still fly in the filtered sunlight through the canopy. The vision shows you where Oriel's bow is kept, in the Forgotten Vale, a hidden valley accessible through a passage in the mountains that the snow elves sealed centuries ago. The Forgotten Vale is everything. It is a winter valley that should not exist, carved by time and magic into a shape of impossible elegance. Frozen waterfalls and ancient snow elf architecture, and the silence of a place that has been undisturbed for an era. There are way shrines throughout the Vale, portals maintained by the last 2 snow elves who are not the blind and feral Falmer. Knight Paladin Gelibor has been tending these shrines since before the Falmer transformation, since before the Dwemer disappeared, since before written history as most people understand it. He is serenely mad, or serenely faithful, depending on your interpretation, convinced that his brother Verthior is still the holy arch-curate that he was before the betrayal. The betrayal, revealed in the Questlines' final act in the Inner Sanctum, is that arch-curate Verthir contracted vampirism and was abandoned by Oriel when his prayers for help went unanswered. His revenge, the tyranny of the sun prophecy itself, was his own creation, a plan to use Oriel's bow and a specific type of arrow to corrupt the sun, blocking its light permanently and giving vampires a world they could walk freely through. He created the prophecy that Harkon has been chasing. He engineered Serana's sealing, ensuring she would be found in the right era. Everything that has been happening is the long consequence of one divine abandonment and one supernatural mind with centuries to plan. Serana's reaction to this revelation is worth paying attention to. She has spent the whole questline being the person who doesn't get to have a reaction to what has been done to her, the person whose fate was decided by her mother to protect her and her father to use her, and now apparently by an ancient vampire priest who saw her as a component in a prophecy before she was even born. She is quiet about this. She holds it. Kindred Judgment is the final quest, returning to Castle Volkihar for the confrontation with Harkon. The fight is well structured, requiring the use of sun-hallowed arrows from Oriel's bow to damage him during phases when he is invulnerable to regular attacks. When he falls, Serana says something about her father, something that registers grief and relief simultaneously, which is the only emotionally proportionate response to killing a parent who has spent centuries making choices that destroyed everyone around him while believing, sincerely, that he was building something worth building. Section 9, Der Dragonborn. The island at the edge of the world. When you first receive a message that strange masked figures have appeared in the cities of Skyrim, asking about the Dragonborn, you might think it is another complication in an already complicated existence. And then 2 of them attack you in Windhelm. And then someone mentions an island called Solstheim off the northeastern coast, and the quest Dragonborn begins. Solstheim is an extraordinary piece of game design, a different world built inside the same world. A volcanic island where ash replaces snow, and the architecture is Dunmer rather than Nordic, and the rhythms of life are darker and older and less explained. Raven Rock, the main settlement, is a former East Empire Company mining town that now operates as a Dunmer colony under House Redoran's authority, still functioning, still alive, but operating under the particular weight of a culture that remembers the eruption of Red Mountain and the destruction it caused, and has built its survival around the memory of loss. The questline's antagonist, Mirak, is the first Dragonborn in history. He predates the Dragon War. He was a dragon priest who discovered his own nature, was seduced by Hermaeus Mora's promises of forbidden knowledge, and used his Thuum to betray the dragon he served. He was imprisoned in Apocrypha, Hermaeus Mora's realm of endless and terrible books, where he has been existing in a state of power and imprisonment for thousands of years. When you arrive in Solstheim, his influence has already been working on the island's population, compelling them to build strange stone formations around the standing stones in a trance state that they cannot explain or escape from. The Black Books are the mechanism through which Mirak's story is told. These are tomes of forbidden knowledge scattered across Solstheim, each one a portal to a different corner of Apocrypha, Hermaeus Mora's endless library, where the shelves extend beyond sight, and the light is the color of old paper, and the seekers and lurkers, Mora's custodians, patrol the aisles with the implacable purpose of beings who are not interested in negotiating. Each black book contains a unique power, a word of power, or a permanent ability, and reading them all gives you a progressively more complete picture of what Apocrypha actually is. Not a punishment, but Hermaeus Mora's private museum, containing everything that has ever been written, and many things that haven't been yet, and at least one Dragonborn who has been reading there for 3,000 years and has grown very powerful indeed. The word of power quests on Solstheim, the search for the 3 words of Bend Will, the shout that allows you to dominate any mind, dragon or mortal, are the structural spine of the Dragonborn questline. You gather them through adventures that take you across the island's landscape, through the ancient Nordic ruins of Saring's Watch and In Chardak and the underground fastness of Apocrypha itself. Nachardak is a Dwemer ruin that has been partially flooded for centuries, requiring the retrieval and activation of control cubes to drain and navigate the interior. It is one of the best designed dungeons in the DLC, architecturally coherent in a way that suggests the space was genuinely built by people who were solving engineering problems, rather than by level designers who were solving gameplay problems, though of course it was both simultaneously. The quest, the Path of Knowledge, which leads you there, involves working with a Redguard warrior named Neloth, who is at least 600 years old and carries himself with the specific arrogance of someone who has been right more often than anyone else they know for several centuries and sees no reason to adjust his manner to account for lesser intelligences. Neloth is among Skyrim's finest companions, not in the mechanical sense, but in the sense of a character whose voice and personality and history are so clearly defined that his presence in any scene improves it. He comments on your performance without warmth. He expresses curiosity about your abilities in the way of a scientist observing a phenomenon rather than a person observing another person. He is genuinely useful in a fight because he is, at 600 years old, an extremely powerful mage. He will absolutely let you die if he thinks the resulting data is interesting enough. The confrontation with Miraak happens in Apocrypha itself, in a version of the realm that Miraak has shaped to his own preferences, which is to say, enormous and overwhelming and designed to demonstrate how much power he has accumulated over millennia. He steals dragon souls. When you kill a dragon in Solstheim, Miraak appears and takes what should be yours, which is both mechanically annoying and narratively perfect. He is a Dragonborn who has had nothing to do for 3,000 years except absorb power and plan, and the arrogance of his voice in those moments, the dismissal in it, is the arrogance of someone who genuinely cannot conceive of losing. But Hermaeus Mora has his own perspective on Miraak. Mora has been keeping Miraak because Miraak is useful, a perfect servant who cannot leave, who has spent millennia accumulating knowledge that feeds back into the library. But Miraak has always wanted to escape. He has always seen Mora as an obstacle rather than a patron. And you, the new Dragonborn, are presenting Hermaeus Mora with an interesting option, a fresher, less exhausted, and presumably more pliable servant in exchange for the information needed to defeat Miraak. Mora gives you the final word of Bend Will. You use it on Miraak. He is unable to defend himself because the prince has withdrawn his protection. Miraak dies in Apocrypha, his soul finally released after 3,000 years. And Hermaeus Mora watches this with the specific satisfaction of a collector who has reorganized his shelves in a way that serves them better. The Dragonborn DLC's secondary questlines add enormous texture to Solstheim. At the summit of Apocrypha involves the Black Book's quest chain itself. The quest Unearthed, in which a reluctant archaeologist named Rallis Sidaris hires you to fund an excavation of Kolbjorn Barrow, where the dragon priest Azadal is entombed, is one of the DLC's best. Each stage of the excavation reveals more of what Rallis is becoming under Azadal's influence, a corruption that is gradual and uncomfortable, and ends in a moment that forces a moral reckoning about what you are responsible for when you are funding someone else's work without asking enough questions. The Skal Village questline involves the indigenous people of Solstheim, the Skal, who have been living on the island since before the Dunmer came, and whose Allmother, Freya, becomes one of your primary allies in the early Dragonborn content. The quest, a new source of Stalrim, requires finding a missing blacksmith and recovering the knowledge of Stalrim crafting, the ancient ice material that the Skald regard as sacred, crystallized tears of their gods. The questline treats this sacredness with respect in a way that Skyrim occasionally manages and many games never do. The werewolf quest, Filial Bonds, in which you help a hunter named Wolf Wildblood find his brother Torkild, who has become a werebear, is brief and touching and ends with a choice about mercy. The werebear mechanics on Solstheim, the fact that werebears exist here and not in Skyrim proper, adds a small piece to the larger picture of what makes this island different from the mainland, stranger and older in some ways and more fragile in others. Section 9b. The Civil War in detail. Hold by hold, choice by choice. Before we move into the hidden questlines, the buried ones that most players stumble past without ever triggering, there is a story that deserves its own careful examination, one that the game offers you from almost the first hour, and that keeps running quietly in the background of everything else until you either choose a side or choose to keep your distance. The Civil War questline of Skyrim is not the most dramatic story the game tells, but it might be the most honest one. Ulfric Stormcloak is in that cart with you at the beginning. He is gagged and bound and recognizable to the Imperials as their most dangerous prisoner, and the reason he is gagged is not theatrical. He can use the Thuum. He killed High King Torygg with it, in a formal challenge that the game presents from multiple angles simultaneously, allowing you to hear it described as honorable combat by Stormcloak supporters and as assassination with an unfair weapon by Imperial ones. Both descriptions are based on facts. The question of which description is correct depends entirely on the values you bring to the hearing of it. Ulfric Stormcloak's cause rests on two pillars: the Nordic right to self-determination and the right to worship Talos without Thalmor interference. The second pillar is the one that carries the most emotional weight for the Nords of Skyrim, because Talos was a Nord before he was a god, a man from their culture who through deeds and will and the particular relationship between mortals and divinity in this universe ascended to actual godhood. The Thalmor, who are the Aldmeri Dominion's ideological enforcers, dispute this. They dispute it for political reasons, because a human god undermines their theological framework, which holds that elves are the superior race because they are closer to the divine. Banning Talos worship is not simply a religious prohibition, it is an assertion about the hierarchy of beings. Heimskr understands this, the street preacher in Whiterun's Wind District, who shouts his sermons with the particular intensity of someone whose volume has increased in inverse proportion to how much his audience is listening. He is not a madman. He is a former scholar who has reached the conclusion that measured academic argument cannot compete with unjust law, and has adjusted his methods accordingly. His theology is coherent. His delivery is exhausting. Both things are true. The Stormcloak questline begins with your induction at the Palace of the Kings in Windhelm, where Ulfric sits on a throne in the great frigid hall that has not been properly heated in years, holding court with that particular mixture of genuine conviction and personal charisma that makes leaders both effective and dangerous. Galmar Stonefist, his second, is blunt and direct and has the warrior's impatience with complexity. The first missions, clearing Dunmer and Argonian agents from Ulfric's planned supply routes, set up the moral texture of what follows. The Stormcloak cause operates with a confident certainty that its own people are in the right and that anyone not aligned with that certainty is the enemy. The Imperial questline begins differently, with General Tullius and Castle Dower in solitude, surrounded by the machinery of a professional military that has been trying for years to end a conflict that keeps not ending. Tullius is not a villain. He is a practical man serving an institution he believes in, frustrated by the complications of governing a province that does not fully want to be governed. Legate Ricky, his Nord second-in-command, carries something the general cannot carry, the complexity of being personally sympathetic to the cause she is professionally fighting against. She believes in the Empire. She also believes that Talos is worth worshipping. She has found a way to hold both beliefs simultaneously, which is either integrity or compartmentalization, depending on your interpretation. The battle for Whiterun, which falls in the middle of both questlines, is Skyrim's most significant individual combat sequence in the Civil War. Whiterun is the most recognizable city in the province, the one that sits at the geographic and narrative center, and the fact that it becomes a battlefield is designed to cost something. Jarl Balgruuf has been neutral. He has been trying to remain neutral. The game forces him off the fence, And it is painful either way because Balgruuf is a good Jarl, the kind who thinks about his people's actual welfare, rather than just their nominal loyalty. And the idea of battle in his city's streets is something he has spent real effort trying to prevent. The siege itself is fierce and brief, and involves fighting through spaces you know, the market district, the gates, the approaches to Dragon's Reach. If you are Stormcloak, you are invaders in a city that you know is good, but that you have decided must be taken. If you are Imperial, you are defending something that has meaning. Neither feels entirely clean. The hold-by-hold progression of the war involves battles for Windhelm, Solitude, Markarth, and other cities that are handled as quest objectives rather than fully staged encounters, which is one of the Civil War questline's genuine limitations. The architecture of the conflict, the politics of it, the individual stories it contains are more interesting than the mechanical battles that resolve it. Galmar and Ricky both have more to say than the combat gives them room for. The Jarl replacements that follow battles, loyal Jarls being deposed and installed, are noted in dialogue but never fully felt. What the Civil War does well is the texture of a conflict with no clean resolution. The White Gold Concordat was a real document signed under real duress. The Thalmor's manipulation of both sides is a real conspiracy documented in real embassy files. Ulfric's status as an unwitting asset of the very people he is fighting is a real fact about the situation. And none of this information is given to you for free. You have to find it, read it, think about it, and arrive at your own conclusions. The questline's epilogue, such as it is, involves the Jarl of the victorious side granting you a title and a house Carl, and the particular hollow satisfaction of having helped one set of people win over another set of people in a war that the actual existential threat to Skyrim, the dragons, did not care about at all. The dragons came back. The Civil War continued. The Thalmor watched from the embassy, updated their intelligence files, and waited. There is a mod, frequently cited in discussions of Skyrim's political content, that attempts to fully flesh out the Civil War with additional quests and battles and resolution content. The fact that it exists and that it has been downloaded millions of times tells you something about the degree to which players felt the official content was pointing at something larger than it delivered. The bones of a great political story are present in the base game. The flesh of it is thinner than the skeleton suggests it should be, but the bones are real, and following them is genuinely interesting. And the questions the questline raises are good questions, even when the answers are left to you. Section 9C. Lesser-known questlines and the people who live between the main stories. There is a woman in Windhelm named Viola Giordano who is convinced that there is a vampire conspiracy operating in the city. She is not technically wrong, given that there is a serial killer whose methods involve a degree of magical anatomical knowledge that implies occult involvement, but she is wrong about the specific vampires she suspects, and her accusations have made her unpopular. The Blood on the Ice investigation can be influenced by speaking to her, and she appears throughout the questline as both a source of leads and a cautionary example of what happens when correct general suspicion attaches itself to incorrect specific targets. Aventus Aretino, the child whose Black Sacrament opens the Dark Brotherhood questline, has a follow-up that most players miss. After Grelod the Kind has been dealt with, and after the orphanage is placed under the management of a woman named Constance Michel, who is everything Grelod was not, the children at Honor Hall have stories of their own. Runa Fair Shield, Francois Beaufort, Hroar, Samuel, Sophie, the girl selling flowers outside Windhelm's gates, who is also waiting for adoption. These children exist as background detail in most playthroughs. Some of them can be adopted in the Hearthfire DLC, which is the game's most domestic and in some ways most quietly radical addition, simply allowing you to build a house and bring people to live in it. The Hearthfire questline, if a collection of building projects and adoption mechanics constitutes a questline, is worth examining for what it represents. The three homesteads, Lakeview Manor near Falkreath, Windstad Manor in Hjalmarch's marshes, and Heljarken Hall in the Pale, are purchased as land grants from the respective Jarls and built piece by piece using materials gathered or purchased throughout the province. They can be attacked by bandits and giant raids and occasional assassins. The furnishing choices affect who will move in and what the domestic space feels like, and the combination of practical management and personal investment that goes into building a home in Skyrim is a different kind of game from the one that begins with Dragonfire and Helgen. Adopting a child in Hearthfire is a mechanical process, but it creates something that feels genuine. The children you can adopt include street orphans and orphanage residents and children whose particular backstories carry weight once you know them. Sophie, who sells flowers outside Windhelm because she needs the money to eat, whose father died in the war and whose mother died before that, can be brought home to the manor you have built, and the morning after she moves in, she will leave a small gift by your bed, something she found or made, and this simple automated gesture registers as something proportionately larger than its mechanical components. The Quest One with the Pack, available after completing the companion's quest line, if you remain a werewolf, sends you into the hunting grounds through the ritual of Hircine. The hunting grounds are Hircine's realm, a version of an endless forest that exists in oblivion as a kind of eternal chase, and the inhabitants who you encounter there are shades of hunters and prey who have been in this cycle so long they no longer distinguish between the two states. The quest is brief, but it adds a dimension to the companion's faith that the main quest line only gestures at. The quest Ilmet, by Moonlight, in the version where you defend Sinding from Hircine's hunters, has a small coda that many players miss. If you have killed enough hunters in the hunting grounds to impress Hircine, he appears and grants you the ring regardless of whether you killed Sinding or protected him, commenting that the quality of your hunt has been worth rewarding. It is a small moment of Daedric amorality, the prince expressing something like respect without any of the moral architecture that would make that respect feel earned in human terms. Hircine doesn't care whether you protected Sinding or betrayed him. He cares whether you were excellent. The quests associated with the Standing Stones of Skyrim are not traditional quests in the sense of having journal entries, but they function as choices that shape the character you play throughout the whole game. The Guardian Stones, the first three you encounter on the road from Helgen to Riverwood, offer the warrior, mage, and thief configurations, each activating a different set of passive bonuses tied to that archetype. The Serpent Stone, found on an ice floe in the frozen sea, poisons enemies. The Lady Stone, near Falkreath, accelerates health and stamina recovery. The Lord Stone, on a hillside in the Pale, provides physical resistance. The Atronach Stone, in the Rift, absorbs magicka from incoming spells. The Tower Stone unlocks any lock once a day. The Standing Stones are not explained by any quest. You simply find them in the world, activated by touching them, and you choose. It is Skyrim distilled to its most essential gesture, a choice made in a landscape, with consequences that persist for as long as you carry it. The Quest. A Night to Remember, Sanguine's quest line, has a post-completion discovery that the player house in Whiterun's Breeze home contains a wedding ring if you agreed, while blackout drunk, to marry someone. Who you agreed to marry depends on decisions made in the blackout sequence that you reconstruct during the quest. The game does not make this permanent, but it remembers it. The quest's Unfathomable Depths, available at the East Empire Company's Riften dock office, involves an Argonian woman who needs someone to retrieve an ancient tablet from Avanchenzel, a submerged Dwemer ruin on the Rift's western border. The tablet is the Book of Knowledge, a record of Dwemer technical understanding, and retrieving it while the ghosts of the scholars who came before you echo through the ruins, their conversation playing out in fragments around you as you follow their path, is one of the most atmospheric things Skyrim does quietly. The scholars argued about the ethics of what they were doing. They disagreed about the risks. They came anyway. Their echoes are still arguing. The ancient traveler questline in the Labyrinthian, experienced during the College of Winterhold's main quest, is not technically a separate quest, but deserves separate attention for the way it layers a ghost story inside an adventure story. The pendant that Savos Aran gives you as the key to Labyrinthian triggers a series of memory echoes throughout the dungeon. His expedition, his fellow students, the way the group's confidence deteriorated as the dungeon's dangers compounded, and the choice he made at the end of that deterioration, the betrayal of his companions that was also a practical decision, the sacrifice of people he knew and cared about to seal something that needed to stay sealed. Savos Aran became Archmage afterward. He spent his career trying to ensure that nothing of what he did became known. The echoes in Labyrinthian are his victims' last moments, preserved in stone, still talking. The quest to kill an empire, in the Dark Brotherhood questline, contains a small moment that deserves mention independent of the larger story. When you speak to the Emperor's decoy in the dining room of the Blue Palace, and he understands what you are, and he accepts it without fear or begging, the conversation you have is one of the most unexpectedly dignified in the game. He has been standing in for a more important man in a dangerous world for years. He has thought about the risks. He is not surprised. He asks only that you make it quick and clean, and there is something in the directness of that request that honors the person who is making it. The quests in Riften connected to Maven Blackbriar, several of them given by Maven directly, involve errands that are on the comfortable side of legally ambiguous and the uncomfortable side of socially tolerated. Maven runs Riften's economy through a combination of the meadery she owns, the Thieves Guild she controls, and the Dark Brotherhood she has on retainer for situations that the Guild is not the right tool for. The quests she gives are not complicated. Go here, do this, confirm it is done. But the texture of her expectations, the complete absence of moral ambiguity in her own self-assessment, the way she speaks to you as a useful instrument rather than a person, is a portrait of a certain kind of power that Skyrim renders accurately. The quest promises to keep, involving Louis Latruche and the Blackbriar family's prize horse Frost, connects to Maven's world in a way that the game makes available to those who pay attention. The Blackbriar family's reach extends to this horse because it extends to everything of value in the Rift, and the question of whether you help Louis Latruche escape with a horse that was never properly his, or help the Blackbriars maintain possession of something they acquired through leverage, is a small-scale version of every political question the game raises about power and legitimacy. And then there is the quest, The Mind of Madness, which deserves more time than the Daedric section gave it. The interior of Pelagius's mind, which you navigate using the Wabbajack as a therapeutic instrument at Sheogorath's direction, is one of Skyrim's genuine attempts at surrealism. The paranoia sequence, where you use the Wabbajack to transform the embodiment of suspicion into something Pelagius can address directly, is a model of how to treat psychological material in a game context, not reducing it to a simple obstacle, but engaging with the texture of what the condition actually feels like. Pelagius the Mad was a real historical figure in the Elder Scrolls universe, a high king of Skyrim before Torrig, whose mental illness was documented extensively and whose reign was ended by his instability. Sheogorath's presence in his mind, the Prince of Madness treating the most famous Mad King of Nordic history as a vacation destination, is deeply appropriate in a way that the game earns. The reward from completing Sheogorath's quest is the Wabbajack, which does random things when you use it on people. Sheep become Draugr, chickens become fire Atronachs, important enemies become sweet rolls. The randomness is not a mechanical limitation, it is a feature. It is Sheogorath's gift, which is to say it is exactly as useful and as dangerous and as unpredictable as madness itself. Section 10. Hidden Stories Part 1. Murder Mysteries and Forbidden Legends. Skyrim contains approximately 337 readable books. That is approximately 316,000 words of in-game text. For comparison, that is significantly more than the full word count of the Fellowship of the Ring. Bethesda hired actual writers. The history exists in readable form within the game world, not in a wiki or a developer's notebook, but in physical books you pick up off shelves and carry around in your pockets and sometimes read while standing in the middle of a dungeon because the dungeon has a library and you got distracted. Among those books are the seeds of some of the game's finest hidden quest lines. Forbidden Legend begins when you read a book called Lost Legends, which can be found in multiple locations but sits most accessibly in Farengar's library in Dragon's Reach. The book is a scholarly account of an ancient archmage named Galdur, who was murdered by his 3 sons after they stole his amulet and divided it between themselves, each taking a piece to use as a power source. King Harold of the First Era sent his personal battle mage, Lord Geirmund, to hunt them down. The brothers were eventually defeated and entombed, their pieces of the amulet buried with them, and the story was deliberately erased from history by a Jarl who didn't want the knowledge spreading. The quest sends you to 3 separate Nordic tombs. Folgunthur, in the marshes near the coast, contains the journal of a recent scholar who came looking for the same things and died finding them. Geirmund's Hall sits on an island in a lake east of Ivarstead, the tomb of the battle mage himself, who was buried there to guard what he had sealed. And Sarthal contains the 3rd piece, accessible after the College of Winterhold has cleared a path through the ruins. Each dungeon has a unique boss fight with one of the Galder brothers, each of whom fights with the specific power embodied in their piece of the amulet. Reachwater Rock is where you bring the three pieces together, and it is worth going there expecting more than a simple completion, because what happens is genuinely elegant. The brothers rise again, drawn by the proximity of the complete amulet, and you must fight all three of them in sequence. And then Galder himself appears to banish his sons back to whatever rest they have managed in the intervening millennia. He gives you the reforged amulet without ceremony, which is exactly right, because the giving of a gift does not require performance. The Galder amulet adds 30 points each to health, magicka, and stamina, making it one of the most generally useful accessories in the game. But more importantly, it closes a loop in history. Someone tried to erase this story. You recovered it. The story survives. Blood on the Ice is Windhelm's murder investigation, and it is one of the most carefully constructed quests in Skyrim in terms of deliberate misdirection. A woman's body is found in the cemetery at night. The guards are investigating. The investigation implicates Woundfirth, the Unliving, the court mage, and the evidence is genuinely convincing. Alchemical residue, the timing of his movements, his general ominous demeanor. If you arrest him, he is taken to jail. And then another murder happens, which is both narratively satisfying and mechanically unfortunate, because it means you arrested the wrong person. The actual killer is Calixto Corium, the proprietor of the House of Curiosities, a kind of eccentric museum in Windhelm's Grey Quarter. Calixto is cheerful and helpful and has been quietly murdering women in an attempt to use their body parts in a ritual to resurrect his dead sister. The quest's design is a small masterwork of how to construct false certainty. Woundfirth is suspicious on every surface reading. Calixto is friendly and harmless seeming and has been doing terrible things behind the specific social camouflage of being pleasant to talk to. When you pursue the real investigation, the evidence clicks into place with that particular satisfaction of a truth that was always there. The Forsworn conspiracy is Markarth's questline, and it takes everything uncomfortable about that city and stares at it directly. Markarth is a stone city built into the face of a cliff, old and rich and deeply divided. The city's Nords and the Forsworn, who once held the Reach, exist in a relationship of mutual grievance that has never been resolved. When you arrive, you witness a murder in the marketplace, and the murderer shouts something about the Reach before dying, and the investigation that follows pulls at the threads of the city's political reality until the whole thing is exposed. Waylene was a plant. The whole incident was staged by a man named Eltries, who is trying to expose a conspiracy. The Silverblood family, one of Markarth's most powerful clans, runs the Sidna mine on prisoner labor, controls the Markarth Guard through Captain Aldous, and has been eliminating people who ask the wrong questions. Eltris is one of those people. You end up in Sidna Mine, which is Markarth's prison, which is also the most secure prison in Skyrim, dug into the mountain and worked by its own inmates. The Forsworn are here, led by Modonok, the king in rags, a man who led the Forsworn's uprising 2 decades ago and has been imprisoned ever since, running his movement from inside the mine with the particular authority of a man who has not stopped being who he is even in captivity. You can help him escape, or you can help the Silverbloods contain him. Both choices have costs. Neither is clean. No Stone Unturned is technically a guild quest, but operates as a city-wide treasure hunt. The Stones of Baranzia are 24 unusual gems scattered throughout Skyrim, each one part of a larger gem called the Crown of Baranzia. They are in dungeons and holds and palaces and the occasional table in a Jarl's private quarters. And finding all 24 and recovering the crown involves visiting more of Skyrim's geography than almost any other single quest. The completion reward, Vex's recut of the crown into the Prowler's Profit perk that dramatically increases gem finds in chests, is not particularly useful for most playthroughs, but is intensely satisfying for the kind of player who has been running the stone hunt. Laid to Rest begins in Morthal, a small town in the marshes of Yalmarch, where the fog comes in from the fen and lies over the wooden buildings in a way that makes everything seem softer and more uncertain. A house burned down recently, killing a woman and her child. The child's ghost appears to you at night and asks you to find what really happened. The investigation involves vampires, a man who brought a vampire into his house and thought he could keep the relationship contained, and a coven of vampires in a nearby ruin who have been planning a systematic takeover of Morthal. The resolution involves destroying the coven and clearing the name of Thaunir, who has been carrying guilt for his involvement in a situation he did not fully understand. The child's ghost says goodbye. Frostflow Abyss is technically a miscellaneous quest that becomes something much larger. You find an abandoned lighthouse on the coast north of Dawnstar. Inside, the family that lived there is gone. Journals and notes tell you what happened, slowly and in reverse chronological order, as you descend into the cavern system beneath the lighthouse. A Falmer attack, a father who followed them to rescue his wife, a mother who followed them to rescue her child, a child who went first, on his own, and the terrible logic of each subsequent death following from the one before. The completion of the quest requires destroying the Chorus Queen in the depths, and releases the spirit of the child, Sudi, who was consumed by the queen and has been trapped inside her. His spirit rises and thanks you, and then the quest ends, and the lighthouse stands empty on the coast. The ghost of Old Hroldan begins by renting a room at the Old Hroldan Inn and being woken in the middle of the night by a ghost. The ghost mistakes you for an ancient hero named Hjalti, who once slept in that room, and who the ghost served in a battle long ago. Hjalti is, the game implies without stating directly, the historical figure who later became Tiber Septim, the first emperor, who was himself eventually deified as the god Talos. The ghost just wants his sword. The quest involves finding and returning the blade, and the conversation you have with the ghost before and after is one of those quiet, uncelebrated moments where Skyrim's history and mythology and present-day reality all fold into each other in the way of things that have been thought about carefully. In My Time of Need involves a Redguard woman named Sadia who says she is being hunted by assassins from Hammerfell. The Alikir warriors, Redguard mercenaries, Ornim sorceries are looking for her in Skyrim. Each side tells you a story. Sadia says she is a political refugee who spoke out against the Aldmeri Dominion and fled. The Alikir say she is a traitor who sold information to the Dominion that got people killed. Both stories are plausible. The evidence available to you does not definitively resolve it. The choice of who to believe and help feels genuinely uncertain, and that is the point. Not every moral choice comes with sufficient information. Sometimes you pick, and you live with the picking. Promises to Keep is a small quest in Riften about a horse named Frost, a fine stallion whose ownership is disputed between a man named Louis Latrouche and a member of the Blackbriar family. The resolution involves either letting Latrouche have the horse, keeping the horse yourself, or resolving the situation in various other ways. And the questline is entirely too short, but perfectly calibrated. Frost is the best horse in Skyrim by standard measurements, which makes the question of who deserves him feel appropriately consequential. Section 11. Hidden Stories, Part 2. Political intrigue, tragic lives, and strange encounters. The Civil War questline runs alongside everything else in Skyrim, never urgent but always present, a choice that most players make at some point and that shapes the texture of the game's political landscape, even if it doesn't change the outcome in any fundamental sense. The Stormcloak questline and the Imperial questline mirror each other structurally, involving city sieges and diplomatic negotiations and moments of genuine martial pageantry, but they diverge in the philosophy they ask you to embody. Joining the Stormcloaks means taking up with Ulfric, whose position is principled and whose means are complicated. He believes in Skyrim's independence, in the right of Nords to worship Talos without permission from an Aldmeri document. He killed the High King in a formal challenge. Whether the challenge was honorable is a question that Skyrim presents fairly from multiple sides. The Stormcloak questline sends you to liberate holds, including the emotionally complex siege of Whiterun, a city whose Jarl has tried to remain neutral and cannot. Joining the Imperial Legion means taking up with the remnant of an empire that has been gradually diminishing since the events of the Oblivion Crisis, that signed the White Gold Concordat as a strategic retreat rather than an agreement it believed in, and that is trying to hold together institutions that have outlasted multiple crises and may not outlast this one. The Imperial questline's emotional register is that of people doing necessary things in the absence of good options, which is less satisfying than Ulfric's romantic nationalism and possibly more honest. Both quest lines include the optional peace conference at High Hrothgar, and both include the final battle for Solitude or Windhelm, depending on which side you are on. The sacking of Windhelm, if you are Imperial, and the liberation of Windhelm, if you are Stormcloak, involve fighting through the same streets from opposite directions. The same spaces mean different things depending on the story you are inside. There is a quest that sits adjacent to the Civil War called Missing in Action, which involves the Greymane family of Whiterun and their missing son Thorald, who has been imprisoned by the Imperial-aligned Battleborns and handed to the Thalmor because he had Stormcloak sympathies. Rescuing Thorald from Northwatch Keep requires either fighting through a Thalmor garrison, which is extremely satisfying, or completing certain Civil War quests that grant you documents allowing his release. His mother's face when she learns he is free is one of those moments where the game's systemic design conspires to create something genuinely moving. The Companions of Solstheim, the werewolf hunters at Frostmoon Crag, are a small group that you can interact with in the Dragonborn DLC if you are a werewolf. They will not attack you. They offer unique rings for werewolf form play. The encounter is brief, but it expands the lore in the specific way of a detail that confirms the world continues beyond the frame of what you are doing at any given moment. Rise in the East is an easily missed questline involving the East Empire Company, Windhelm's docks, and a pirate operation called the Bloodhorkers. The company's Windhelm office is run by a man named Orthus Indario, who is very far from headquarters and operating on limited resources and somewhat excessive ambition. The quest involves infiltrating the pirate base on an island called Japheth's Folly, discovering that the pirate lord Haldine is using a weather manipulation artifact to keep the company's ships from approaching and destroying him. It is a proper adventure quest with a naval flavor that Skyrim rarely gets to explore, and the reward, the normalization of trade between the company and Windhelm, appears as a physical change in the docks. Lights Out is a solitude quest given by a man named Jari Ra, an Argonian who wants you to extinguish the lighthouse flame northwest of the city so that a ship his Confederates are guiding in can run aground, allowing them to loot the cargo. The quest betrays you at its own conclusion. The Confederates have no intention of paying. The follow-up is a combat sequence through the wrecked ship and the Kyiv system where the crew have taken refuge with the looted goods. The quest is a small, self-contained story about the specific kind of person who makes a deal and then finds out they misjudged the terms. A Few Words with You is one of those quests that isn't a quest in the traditional sense, so much as a recurring social obligation. If you have married Scouts Many Marshes, an Argonian dock worker in Windhelm, he will ask you to talk to the dock supervisor, Torbjorn Shattershield, about improving wages and conditions for the Argonian workers who are required to live outside the city walls. The conversation is uncomfortable in the way of any conversation, where you are asking someone to voluntarily reduce the advantage they currently hold, and the outcome is uncertain but possible. And the resolution, small as it is, represents something significant in the context of Windhelm's structural discrimination against non-Nords. The Whitefile questline involves an old alchemist named Norelion, who has spent his entire adult life searching for a legendary vessel from Nordic history, a vial said to replenish any substance placed inside it. He is dying. You find the phial in a Nordic ruin and return it to him, and it is cracked, and he dies shortly after holding it, and his apprentice asks you to take the broken shards and have it repaired. The repair requires 3 rare materials and a visit to Quintus, the apprentice, who will maintain the quest. The repaired phial is yours, and it is a genuinely useful alchemical tool. But what the quest is really about is an old man's life work and what it means when the thing you have given everything to turns out to be real but arrives too late. A return to your roots is a quest involving Crimson Nirnroot, those glowing red plants that are found exclusively in Blackreach. Collecting 30 of them for the alchemist Sindarian completes a request he made in the notes he left in his field laboratory in Blackreach, where he died in the course of his research. The quest does exactly what it sets out to do, which is ensure that you have actually walked through all of Blackreach rather than rushing through it, because Bethesda built something extraordinary down there and they wanted you to see it. Repentance is an unmarked quest in a tower south of Riften called Darklight Tower, where a woman named Ilia asks for your help fighting her way up through the tower to stop her mother from being transformed into a Hagraven. Her mother wants to be transformed. The Hagraven ritual requires a blood sacrifice, and that sacrifice is meant to be Ilia herself. The quest is about a daughter trying to save a mother who no longer wants to be saved, and the moral weight of that situation is handled quietly and with more care than its modest size suggests it deserves. Ill Met, by Moonlight, mentioned briefly in the Daedric section, deserves more time here in the context of what it says about the Forsworn in the Reach. The Hagravens who feature in Hircine's quest and in various Forsworn encampments throughout the Reach are former human women who chose transformation in exchange for magical power, giving up their humanity to become something older and more dangerous. The lore surrounding this transformation, the precise theology of it, is distributed across books and dialogue in a way that rewards attention. The Forsworn are not simply bandits. They are a culture with a specific spiritual cosmology, a specific history, and a specific grievance. And the Hagravens who serve as their spiritual leaders carry all of that history in their transformed bodies. The Bard's College questline in Solitude is the shortest major faction content in the game, and probably the most frustrating for what it could have been, involving a series of fetch quests that culminate in burning an effigy of King Olaf One-Eye at a festival called The Burning of King Olaf. The lore buried in the questline is interesting. Olaf One-Eye was a high king who claimed he tamed a dragon, and whose historical legitimacy has been disputed ever since. The burning is a tradition that some people consider disrespectful, and others consider necessary. The poetry competition, the festival itself, the dialogue with the bards who argue about whether the event should happen at all of it gestures toward a richer story than the questline actually tells. The reward, joining the Bard's College and receiving a skill increase, is modest. The question of what a college of bards in a society that values spoken history and oral tradition should actually feel like is left for the player's imagination. Skyrim, the player house in Windhelm, is connected to the Blood on the Ice investigation in a way that some players never notice. The house was occupied by someone involved in Calixto's activities before you buy it, and there are remnants of that involvement in the rooms before you clear them. It is the smallest of details, but it connects the city's criminal history to the domestic space in a way that makes the house feel like it has a past. The quests related to becoming Thane of each hold are not individual quest lines in the traditional sense, but they map a relationship between you and the political geography of Skyrim that rewards completion. Becoming Thane of the Reach requires a particular kind of standing with the Jarl of Markarth, who changes depending on the Civil War's outcome. Becoming Thane of Winterhold is straightforward, because Winterhold's needs are modest and its political situation is stable. Becoming Thane of Falkreath involves completing enough small tasks for citizens that the Jarl feels comfortable endorsing you, and the journey through those small tasks is a portrait of Falkreath Hold's community in miniature. A chance arrangement is the opening quest of the Thieves Guild, technically, but it deserves its own moment because of the specificity of its staging. Brynjolf's scheme, the planted evidence in Bronshae's market stall, is a minor crime dressed up as a demonstration of skill, and whether it sits comfortably depends on what you eventually learn about Bronshae. Bronshae is a survivor. He grew up in an orphanage, not Grelod's, but not far in spirit, and he has built something modest and legitimate in Riften's market. The fact that the introduction to the Thieves Guild involves getting an innocent man arrested is not an oversight in the design. It is the quest line announcing its stakes. The quest alteration ritual spell, and the equivalent quests for other magic schools, involve proving advanced mastery to the relevant faculty member at the College of Winterhold. These quests are brief, but they fill in something the main college quest line never quite addresses, which is the actual experience of becoming skilled at magic. The texture of a practice that is also a discipline, the specific challenges that come with each school. Conjuration involves banishing Dremora repeatedly in a snowy field while they express displeasure. Destruction involves completing a timed training exercise that tests both accuracy and stamina. Illusion requires performing a complex multi-target spell successfully. Each of these quests exists in a corner of the game that most players never find, and all of them serve the world-building purpose of confirming that the college is a real academic institution, with real standards, not just a building where quests happen. The Stendarr quests, technically a series of miscellaneous objectives involving the vigilance of Stendarr, who patrol Skyrim hunting vampires and Daedra worshippers, exist mostly as atmosphere. The vigilants are zealous and occasionally wrong-headed, and represent the specific kind of institutional faith that prioritizes the rules over the people the rules were meant to protect. They appear throughout the game as quest givers, victims, and obstacles, and their presence as a background institution adds texture to the way Skyrim thinks about the relationship between organized religion and individual divine experience. Kyne's sacred trials, given by a hunter named Froki who lives alone in a shack in the Rift's hills, involves hunting specific animals that have been blessed or corrupted by divine attention. The quest is a meditation on the relationship between mortals and the natural world, on the idea that hunting is a sacred act if done correctly, with attention and respect, rather than a mechanical extraction. Froki is old and sees clearly in the way of people who have lived alone long enough to have stopped performing anything for anyone. His approval, when you complete the trials, is the kind that doesn't need to be expressed loudly. And Grimseaver's Return, involving the elf Mjol, the lioness, and Riften, is a quest that is nominally about recovering a lost sword from a Dwemer ruin, but is actually about the relationship between Mjol and Riften, and why someone like her, genuinely committed to protecting people, chooses to stay in a city as comprehensively corrupt as that one. You recover her sword. She is grateful. She is still there the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning after, standing at the entrance to the Bee and Barb, because somewhere has to have someone standing watch. The quest that functions most purely as environmental storytelling, rather than directed narrative, is Frostflow Abyss. The lighthouse on the coast north of Dawnstar is empty when you find it. The door is unlocked. Inside, the fire is out and the table is set for a meal that nobody ate, and the journals tell the family's story in a way that the game's quest journal registers only as a miscellaneous objective, but that accumulates into something genuinely affecting. The father went down first, following strange noises into the cave system beneath. The mother went down to find him. The son Sudi went last, alone, following everyone he loved into the dark. The Chorus Queen at the bottom of the cavern system is the end of each of their stories, and killing her releases something from her body, a spirit, barely there, that says thank you and ascends. It is the shortest word count for the most complete emotional arc in the game. The quest Repentance at Darklight Tower south of Riften involves Ilia's mother willingly participating in a Hagraven ritual that requires her daughter's death. The transformation from human woman to Hagraven is something that women in the Reach's shamanic tradition pursue as spiritual advancement, the exchange of humanity for a specific kind of ancient terrible power. The Hagraven's appearance, the feathers and the clawed hands, and the eyes that have lost whatever made them eyes and become something else, is intended to register as the cost of that exchange made physical. Ilia doesn't want her mother to die. She doesn't want her mother to transform. The quest doesn't offer a path where neither happens. It offers only the choice of which ending comes with your help or without it. The quest, Coming of Age, near Ironbind Barrow in Windhelm's territory, involves two young adventurers you encounter on the road who are about to do something that will end badly without intervention. The older of the two is trying to talk the younger out of it. The younger is committed. You can follow them in, help them survive, or let events proceed without you. It is one of those small, unmarked moments where Skyrim reminds you that the world is full of people making decisions independently of your participation, and that your choices about whether to get involved have consequences in both directions. The investigation into Potema, the Wolf Queen of Solitude, runs through two connected quests called The Man Who Cried Wolf and The Wolf Queen Awakened. Potema was one of Skyrim's most historically significant rulers, a necromancer who triggered a war and whose political ruthlessness was matched only by her magical capability. She has been dead for centuries. The quests reveal that her cult has been working to resurrect her, pulling her spirit back from whatever rest she achieved after death, and that they have come closer than anyone should be comfortable with. The Wolf Queen Awakened has you confront her spirit in the catacombs beneath Solitude, and the conflict is weighted with the particular unease of facing something that has been dead long enough to become history, and is now attempting to become present again. Her defeat is permanent enough that her spirit cannot reform in the same way again, though the game leaves open the question of whether a consciousness that willful can ever be entirely extinguished. Her sarcophagus remains in the catacombs. The history books still remember her. In the Elder Scrolls universe, memory has a specific relationship with persistence, and what is remembered cannot be entirely said to be gone. The quest, The Lost Paladin, involves recovering the body of a vigilant of Stendar who died in the field, and whose family wants him returned. It is a small quest involving a dangerous location and a straightforward objective, But the way the quest frames its vigilant, the religious fervor, and the genuine cost of that fervor makes it something more than a body retrieval. The quest. Speaking with Silence takes you deep into Snowvale Sanctum with Mercer Frey, and the dungeon itself deserves attention, independent of the betrayal that happens at its end. Snowvale Sanctum is one of Skyrim's most elegant Nordic tombs architecturally, the ice formations and the carved passages creating a space that feels genuinely ancient, in the sense of something built by people for whom these materials were simply what the world offered, and who made something beautiful out of them anyway. The Draugr here are unusually well staged, the encounters progressive in a way that feels less random than many similar dungeons. And Mercer Frey, moving through the space with the casual competence of a man who has been doing dangerous things for a very long time, and finds them unremarkable, is a portrait of a specific kind of professional excellence that his moral bankruptcy cannot retroactively undo. The companion's radiant quests, the endless chain of contracts that Ayla or Farkas or Vilkas send you on after the main quest line is complete, are worth considering as a category. They are procedurally generated, meaning they use templates filled in with random names and locations, but the templates themselves, the rescue quest, the bounty quest, the training quest, are drawn from the companion's actual history and values. You are not doing random errands. You are practicing the way of the warrior as the companions understand it, and the repetition, far from diminishing the experience, reinforces the sense that this is a lifestyle rather than a story arc that terminates. The Thieves Guild special jobs, given by Delvin and Vex and sent to specific cities, are a middle ground between the Radiant quests and the main quest line. Each city has 4 available jobs. The Bedlam job, which requires you to steal a certain value of goods from the city. The Burglary job, which targets a specific residence. The Heist job, which involves a specific valuable item in a guarded location. And the Sweep job, which requires acquiring several marked items from a single building. Completing enough of these in a single city triggers a special job for that city, a more elaborate version with a specific target and a narrative wrapper. The Breville job doesn't exist in Skyrim for geographical reasons, but the Whiterun, Markarth, Windhelm, and Solitude special jobs each flesh out the guild's relationship with those cities in ways that make the province feel like a place where things have been happening long before you arrived. There is also, sitting in the very deepest strata of Skyrim's content, a category of quest that is not a quest at all. The ambient stories told through environmental detail alone, without journal entries or quest markers or any of the conventional machinery of directed narrative. The skeleton in the camp chair outside a ruined tower, with a note that reads, "Only goodbye." The 2 bodies in the snow on a hillside, one frozen, one with an arrow in its back, arranged in a way that implies a pursuit and a failed escape. The graves outside farmsteads with names and dates that suggest something happened here, a plague or a battle, or simply the mortality of the people who built this place and kept it and are now under the earth they used to stand on. These are not quests, but they are stories. And Skyrim is full of them, stitched into the landscape between the named objectives, waiting for anyone who is moving slowly enough to find them. Every one of these quest lines, from the enormous arc of the main quest to the 12-second encounter with a ghost in an inn in the Reach, is a story that Bethesda decided was worth telling. 337 books, 4 major DLC expansions, an uncountable number of small moments, brief encounters, graves with inscriptions and buildings with histories and people with complicated feelings about the complicated world they live in. The companion's post-questline contract work has a specific quest embedded in it that most players trigger accidentally and remember forever. The quest involving the companion's relationship with the Forsworn, sent by Vilkas or Farkas, where you end up in a camp that is neither exactly hostile nor exactly safe, where the mission parameters require a kind of contextual intelligence that the usual approach of hitting things until they fall does not address. It is brief, it is unannounced. It respects you enough to present a complicated situation without prefacing it with explanatory dialogue about the fact that it is complicated. The quest involving the East Empire pendant for the Thieves Guild, a special job for Windhelm, requires breaking into a residence associated with the Shattershield family, whose grief and complicity in criminal activity runs as a thread through multiple Windhelm quest lines simultaneously. You are stealing from people who are already suffering from the Blood on the Ice murders. The Thieves Guild does not care about this context. Vex hands you the job description and wants the pendant. The emotional weight of the timing is yours to carry if you choose to. There is a quest in Markarth, technically miscellaneous, that sends you to find a lost dwarven storeroom key for a Dwemer scholar named Calselmo who needs access to a chamber in Understone Keep that has been inaccessible for years. The chamber contains, among its wonders, a spider automaton that is still functional after centuries. And Calselmo's delight at its existence is the delight of a man whose entire professional life has been dedicated to understanding something that has never fully yielded to understanding, encountering fresh evidence that the Dwemer built better than any current civilization can replicate. He publishes prolifically. He guards his findings jealously. He is, in all respects, exactly the kind of dedicated obsessive that Skyrim's best supporting characters tend to be. Isolde in Whiterun wants a mammoth tusk so she can build a business relationship with the Khajiit caravans. The quest is minimal, a retrieval errand that takes 10 minutes and pays a modest reward, and it would be entirely unremarkable except that Isolde can later become your spouse if you choose, and the details of her ambition, the specific plan she has laid out for herself involving the caravan connection and eventually buying the bannered mare, make her one of the more completely realized potential spouses in the game. She has a future she is working toward. The tusk is part of getting there. You either help or you don't, and the world she is building continues either way. The quest Forgotten Names, in the midden dark beneath the College of Winterhold, is triggered by finding a scene that the game does not explain and does not have to. A gauntlet mounted in stone, surrounded by skeletal remains, a bloodstain that time has darkened but not erased, an incident report that mentions 4 students and 4 rings, and an experiment that went wrong. The rings are scattered through the ruins beneath the college. Returning them to the gauntlet completes a ritual that those students began decades ago, and the Daedric entity that manifests to acknowledge the completion is brief and without ceremony, the way all the most significant things in Skyrim tend to be. The quest Boethia's Calling has a detail that many players do not notice until they have encountered it multiple times. The cultists at Boethia's shrine, the people already there when you arrive, are performing the same ritual that you will be asked to perform. Sacrifice a companion, give Boethia a life, continue the cycle of selection. The pilgrim already on the pillar at the start of the quest is already being consumed by it. You walk into a ceremony that has been happening before you arrived, at multiple shrines, probably for centuries, each iteration selecting a new champion while discarding the previous one. You are not special to Boethia, you are the next useful person who showed up. This framing is not an insult. It is the truth about what the Daedric-Prince relationship looks like from the prince's perspective. The quest. The taste of death ends with Verilus, the priest of Arkay you bring to the cannibal feast beneath Markarth, being killed and eaten. If you are playing a character who has been making moral choices with care throughout the game, this moment costs something. You had to lie to him. You told him something was going to happen, and something else happened instead. And the violation of his trust is the specific kind of thing that Namira values, the step across a line that cannot be uncrossed. The ring of Namira sits on your finger afterward if you choose to keep it. The memory of the feast is yours regardless. Skyrim contains enough story for a lifetime of late nights, and you have only scratched the surface of it. Section 12. The world still breathes. It is late, cozy night. The fire is low. The wind outside has either quieted or you have simply stopped hearing it because you are somewhere else now, somewhere that smells like pine needles and cold stone and the specific wood smoke of a hearth that has been burning for centuries. Somewhere between Helgen and Sovngarde, between the first dragon and the last, you have walked every road in Skyrim, spoken to every grieving parent and nervous thief, an ancient ghost who had something they needed to say. You have carried the Night Mother's coffin through the silence of broken sanctuaries. You have stood at the edge of the soul cairn in the gray light that serves that gray place instead of a sun. You have heard Arngir tell you, with the careful economy of a man who knows the weight of words, that you have the gift. There is something that Skyrim does, in its best moments, that is difficult to name precisely. It is not escapism in the way the word is usually meant, as a replacement for reality, as a running away. It is more like expansion. The province exists at a scale that matches the imagination's capacity for wonder rather than the body's capacity for distance, which means that spending time in it is not a retreat from the world so much as a reminder of how large a well-imagined world can feel. The questlines are the architecture of that feeling. 155 of them, running from the enormous narrative sweep of the main quest, down to a child's thank you, delivered in the form of a flower, placed beside a bed, in a house you built with your own labor, in a virtual province that has been running continuously on servers and consoles and personal computers for well over a decade now. Each one is a story that someone decided was worth telling. Each one asks something of the player who finds it, even if what it asks is only attention. Show up, pay attention, let this matter. Codlac Whitemane wanted Sovngarde. He got it, eventually, because someone carried his research forward and stood in the darkness of his tomb and did what needed doing. The White File was found too late for the man who spent his life seeking it, and that is a kind of tragedy, but the file still works, still fills with whatever substance you need, still serves the function it was made to serve, even though the person who most deserved it never got to use it. Carlia had her name cleared after 25 years and got to stand in Nightingale Hall, wearing the armor of her order again. Serana got to make a choice about what she is, independent of what her father decided for her and what her mother decided to protect her from. Sudi, trapped in the belly of something terrible at the bottom of a frozen lighthouse's cave system, got to say thank you and leave. These are small stories against the backdrop of the World Eater and the Civil War and the Thalmor conspiracy and the vampire lord who wanted to blot out the sun. But they are not less important for their smallness. They are, in some ways, more important. They are the stories that tell you what the world is made of when the great battles are done and the heroes have gone home and the morning comes anyway. Ordinary and specific and irreducibly real. The Greybeards will still be on the mountain. Paarthurnax will still be meditating on the western peak, the oldest living creature in Skyrim, the dragon who chose restraint and has been choosing it again every day for 3,000 years, because choosing it once was not enough, because the draconic nature does not go away. It simply yields to a discipline that has to be continuously renewed. He will be there tomorrow. He will be there when you come back to visit, if you do. The ancient standing stones will be in their places in the hills and by the lakesides and on the ice floes in the frozen sea. They will not explain themselves. They will simply be there, resonating with whatever energy they have been resonating with since long before anyone alive can remember, waiting for someone to touch them and make a choice. The roads between the holds will be quiet at this hour. The bandits are asleep in their camps, and the wolves are somewhere in the pines, and the occasional dragon is circling somewhere over the mountains, drawn back into the world by whatever force was drawing them back. Not gone even now, not entirely, simply fewer than they were before a dragonborn stood in Sovngarde and said, "Enough." The mammoths are where they always are, slow and enormous and accompanied by their giants, moving across the plains below Whiterun in the particular rhythm of beings who have been migrating the same routes for generations. The aurora is doing its slow work above the sea of ghosts, green and violet, and the particular shade of blue that Skyrim's nights contain between the darkest dark and the first suggestion of dawn. Somewhere in the Ratway in Riften, someone is quietly surviving. Somewhere in the Blue Palace in Solitude, a vampire court mage is dispensing advice that she will still be dispensing 200 years from now, when everyone who is currently alive in this story has become history. Somewhere in the midden dark, beneath the College of Winterhold, a gauntlet made of stone is waiting for the rings that will complete it, patient in the way of things that have been waiting a long time. 155 quest lines, hundreds of named characters, tens of thousands of lines of dialogue, 337 books, 4 major add-ons and years of small additions, each one finding another corner of this province that had not been fully examined and saying, here is a story, here is a person, here is something that happened before you arrived and will continue after you leave. Pay attention. You paid attention tonight. That matters. If tonight's journey through Skyrim's stories helped you drift a little slower, helped your body go a little heavier, and your thoughts go a little quieter, consider leaving a like and subscribing so more of these can find their way to you. Drop a comment and tell me which questline is your favorite, the one that stays with you, the one you still think about years later. Tell me the moment that made you stop what you were doing in the game and just stand there, in the snow, or the firelight, or the deep underground, feeling something. I read every single one. Until next time, lower your sword, close your eyes. The fire is warm and the night is long, and there is nowhere else you need to be. Sleep well.